All right, I think we are live here, so hopefully you guys can all hear me okay. Hopefully you're having a good Saturday here, and I was also going to say Sunday, doing a little bit of a different day here, but hopefully you guys are enjoying your Easter weekend if you celebrate Easter here. If not, I'm having a good weekend regardless. And so yeah, like all the other live streams, I'm going to be able to actually do a 2 hour one this time instead of the 1 hour one I had to do last week. So go for about 2 hours here. I'm just going to hang out, be talking cars, answering your questions, and I will be giving priority answering to anyone who does a super chat or a super thanks thing. And also, of course, the members always get priority answering here. And we always have a bunch of new members that always end up joining and getting the gifted memberships and all of that. And so it's going to be a lot of members here, but I'm going to try and get to as many non-member questions as I can as well. But anyway, glad to see so many of you already joined, and thanks for joining. I see MD said he was waiting yet again. So, sorry about the wait, but thanks for being here right from the beginning. And Trucking Car Guy says, well, I got nothing better to do. That's great. I'm happy that, there's still lots of things you can watch. And so I appreciate you choosing to, hang out here on the live stream. It's always good talking with all of you. And all right. So first question from Jesus here says, how will the new Camaro look like? We'll have to see, if they even do a new Camaro that is even a two-door. I was talking a couple of weeks ago about how, they're getting rid of the 6th-gen Camaro, and they're saying the Camaro story isn't over. But, what that looks like, the rumors have suggested an SUV and possibly a sedan, maybe if we're lucky. Maybe they'll surprise us with a two-door as well. I'd like to think that, especially now if you just saw the news from yesterday about how there's rumors that are getting to be stronger that is potentially Dodge is going to actually do a gas-powered Charger here along with the electric one for this new generation. So maybe if everyone still is doing gas, then maybe Chevy will join the fray and, use the Alpha 2 platform from, it's been revised for the Cadillac, CT4 and CT5. Maybe that'll be used for some type of new Camaro. We'll have to wait and see, but not sure what's going to happen with the new Camaro here. And MD says, strange seeing me on a Saturday. Yeah, happy to be joining though. And all right, Omar says, how is a lot of people reviewing the Dark Horse already? So this week was the New York Auto Show, and they were doing ride-alongs with certain people. I did not get that invite. Ford is weird with invites, not only just for me, but for a lot of even larger YouTubers that definitely deserve to be in those types of things, oftentimes aren't. And so the lucky few that got invited got to ride along in the Dark Horse. But it seemed like it was just in like downtown New York City, so it doesn't seem like you're going to get a great feel aside from hearing the exhaust, which from the videos I've heard is even on the Dark Horse. I mean, it's still the Coyote V8, and there's a slight tweak to it, but it sounds basically the same as my Bullet and every other active exhaust Coyote motor since 2018. But yeah, so that's how they're getting it. It's just about getting those lucky invites. And but yeah, I believe I heard that there's going to be Mustang drives potentially. I think early summer. I thought possibly June or something is when the driving events are happening. I don't think anyone's gotten an invite to that yet. I certainly haven't. But typically they only invite you like a month, maybe 2 months ahead of time. So maybe it'll come soon. Maybe it won't. We'll have to see. I'm not holding my breath because, like I said, Ford is not reliable with sending me invites. So and MD also says it's probably a pre-production car. Yeah, they're definitely going to be pre-production cars. Mustang production for the S550s just ended this week, and so then it takes them a little while to switch over the lines and all that. So everything right now that you're seeing out there is a hand-built pre-production car, and those cars will most likely all get crushed, which is a fun little thing for behind the scenes. Most people don't really know about a lot of those prototypes, especially the ones that don't have VINs. Ones with VINs cannot be sold or used, aside from like a show and display kind of thing. So they all get crushed after their time in the spotlight. And Goth Rocker says, I'm not a Ford hater, but Ford started this trend with the Mustang Mach-E. Now GM will make a Camaro SUV and possibly a Corvette SUV, which to me is really sad. Yeah, it's, it is what it is. Obviously, I've kind of supported that with the Mach-E purchase, but, I think it's just, the way things are going these days. All right, awesome. Thanks for gifting the membership, Sean. And I see the Trucking Car Guy snatched that up there. So thanks for grabbing that there. And thanks for the first gift there, Sean. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, it's just the way things are going, everywhere. I would argue, that Porsche was one of the first to really kind of go there with like a sports car brand doing an SUV. And then, that kind of smashed that whole I guess what's the word? Like just preconceived notion of like, this brand has to have this type of vehicle. And then from there, it's kind of just been a slow thing that's really ramped up in the past few years. Um, and Adam says, Saturday live stream, I wasn't prepared. I'll have to go put some pants on. Well, thanks for joining, Adam. Yeah, I just decided to, avoid trying to do one on Easter because I'm sure everyone's going to be, hanging out with family and friends if you celebrate that. So I just wanted to, kind of avoid that whole thing and just do it on Saturday here. And Raphael says, I don't care much for the inside of the Dark Horse, but the outside looks good. It is growing on me, although I think I like all the other 2024 Mustangs better. The Dark Horse still with that black part underneath the headlights is still for some reason reminds me more of a Camaro when they do that. And just that's not going to age well either. Any kind of matte appearance on anything, especially if it's a sticker like it is on the Dark Horse there. I mean, that is not going to look good. Even probably 5 years from now is going to be tough. But even, beyond that, once it's older, it's going to be not great. So I would probably go for a non-Dark Horse if I were to ever get a 2024, but I'm definitely not getting one. MD says, I absolutely don't mind the SUVs with Mustang, Camaro, Corvette model name slapped on, but don't make it electric. If you're going to put a huge nameplate on a car, throw a V8 in it. Yeah. I can appreciate that point of view as well, but just it's the way everything's going. It's one of those things. I know everyone hates hearing about it in the news, but it's just like, that's what they're putting out. And the market's dictating that those are popular. I mean, obviously it's tons and tons of people are buying Mach-E's. They're very, very, successful with that whole, clickbaiting of the name, in a way. And I think everyone else is noticing that and they want to cash in as well. Goth Orker says, Matt, very surprised you did not do a toast in the weekly update to the Mustang S550 production. A great era of Mustang, first offer on every model, rear independent suspension. They will age well. Yeah, I think so too. I didn't do a toast because I actually filmed that one on Friday morning. Typically I do them on Thursday afternoon, and so I don't feel as bad drinking, at like 4 in the afternoon. But whenever it's 9:30 in the morning or whatever, and I filmed that weekly update, I should have done a like a signified a toast instead of a real one. But Triton Car Guy, thank you so much also for gifting 10 memberships and kind of paying it forward there and then some. So thank you so much. So we got all kinds of new people here grabbing memberships. That is so awesome. Thank you so much for doing that and being so generous. And all right. So, but yeah, I would have totally done a toast for the Mustang if it had been, later in the day. MD says the Mach-E would have been great if they tossed the Coyote in it. I'll still accept it even if it had the 3.5 EcoBoost. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see someone try, just kind of hack one up and just, pop a V8 in it and, try and find some way to make that work. Obviously, it'd be a huge headache because you have to re-engineer half the car and all that, but it'd be kind of a fun thing for someone to do someday. And yeah, thanks for getting the party started there, Triton Car Guy. I really, really appreciate it. And MD says, probably the quickest I've ever seen memberships gobbled up. Yeah, it's great. And I'm so glad so many of you have joined here so early on. Sometimes people kind of trickle in later. I'm so glad everyone joined and people didn't get too thrown off by the Saturday thing instead of the Sunday one. And Omar says, what horse name has Ford not used yet? Yeah, there's I guess all the ones that have already been taken up by other stuff like Bronco and I mean, I'm trying to think what other horse names. Like, I guess they haven't used like Stallion yet or something like that, right? So I guess there's probably a few others out there. And you got to make sure you don't step on Ferrari's toes either with their prancing horse. So there's, a few things that are probably off limits. But yeah, I think there's still probably a few names left to go. Raphael says, yeah, let's not have Beth walk in and see you drinking at 9 a.m. Yes, she would be concerned if she saw me drinking at 9 a.m. for sure. Usually not a good sign, although it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but just not my style. So Triton Car Guy says, honestly, I like the name Dark Horse. Not sure about the looks of it. I think the Dark Horse name is great too. And they were doing that like naming contest for like the new black edition that they were doing for like the last model year of the S550s. And I can't remember what the name was, but I remember Dark Horse is one of the names that was submitted. And I'm like, why did they not use Dark Horse? And now we know why. It's because they're like, that is a really good name. Let's use it on something else instead. But yeah, I'm glad they ended up using the name because it is really good. Ace of Spades says, congrats on a nice string of reviews the past few weeks. Love the CX90 and can't wait for the CX70. The new Prius is pretty sweet too. Thank you so much for watching them. Yeah, putting out 4 reviews in a week is, I think, a record for me and a lot of work, especially when they were like long reviews. I mean, those were all so long, and I apologize. I know I try and get these reviews down to lower lengths, but whenever, like with the Prius one and with the Ioniq 6, both of those, had the collabs, with Kirk and with Eric from RevMatch TV. And so whenever you're doing a collab video like that, they just always balloon in length because, I got to make sure I don't cut out too much of what they said, and make sure the conversation still feels natural, even though I am cutting up a bunch of stuff because we talked for 2 hours during the course of the drive or whatever, but, trying to cut all that stuff up is very challenging and it's so much extra work. But even the ones where I did by myself, like the CX90, that's another one where I'm driving the entire day. I'm giving so many impressions and there's so much to cover. Like that one, new engine, new transmission, new platform, new, design for, doing longitudinal engines, like so much stuff. And then you have all the new stuff of like, hey, this is a brand new model, new interior, it's just like so much to cover, so much. And it was a lot of work this week. So I appreciate those of you who watched. I know it was overload and it might take some of you, some time to catch up on some of those if they even appeal to you. And I totally understand if they don't, but it was a lot of work for sure. I don't know if I'll be doing 4 reviews in a week for a long time. That was just the way the embargoes played out, and would not have chosen that myself. But especially with all the New York Auto Show stuff this week, I feel like that all these reviews kind of got lost, not only just for the car channels that posted them, but for the manufacturers. Like, you want to make a splash with your vehicle, the ideal time to do that is a slow news week where there's nothing else going on. And so why everyone chose to do it the same week as the New York Auto Show, I have no clue. But out of my control, I just post it whenever, the embargo is, and that's that. And Elijah says Ford Gallop. Yeah, that could be one they could use. Although there's Gallop Ford, I think, or Gallop and Ford, which is close, but yeah, they're in California. Maybe they'd have something to say about a Gallop model. I don't know. Goth Rocker says, I wish the Mach-E was a different name. I want Mustang to always be remembered with the muscle car. It is just how I am. I wish the new Mustang didn't have the huge screens like the Dark Horse name, though. Yeah, I mean, Mach-E, it's one of those things. I didn't like the name either. I still don't like the name. I still, even with ours, I call it a Mach-E. I never call it a Mustang. If I tell Beth I'm going to go in the Mustang, she knows I'm taking the Bullet. She knows I'm not. I usually call that the Bullet, though, but we never call a Mach-E a Mustang. And yeah, so many other good names I could have used. And Raphael says, this was a great week. Enjoyed all the reviews. The length was fine. I'm glad it didn't bother you. And Broly, thank you so much for the first super chat here. He says, Matt, would you buy the new Camaro 1SS, 1LE, or a Dark Horse? I mean, I guess it depends on how much money you have to spend. If you don't mind spending 60 grand for a Dark Horse, you have more horsepower in the Dark Horse, but I definitely think these days, especially, Camaro is a way better deal right now. Way better. And I'm sure they will improve the Dark Horse a little bit, but we are, pretty sure that the S650 is an evolution of the S550, and that's even being generous calling it an evolution. There's a lot of carryover. So I wouldn't expect the Dark Horse to drive much differently than a Mach 1 with the handling package on it, or PP level 2, regular Mustang GT. So yeah, if it were my money, I love Mustangs right now, but if I had to buy a brand new muscle car this year, I would totally go for the Camaro. The 1S, 1LE would be the way I would go for sure. Because I think you can get one of those, especially if we're talking about 1SS, you can get one of those for what, like 45, maybe something like that. It's been a little while since I've looked at Camaro pricing, but you're saving tens of thousands of dollars probably, especially if you can even get a Dark Horse that's sticker. No one's chomping at the bit for Camaros right now, and Dark Horse, if you can even get it for the 60 grand sticker, you're lucky. You'll probably be paying more. So to me, that's an easy choice. I go for Camaro for sure. And Camaro also has the more restrained screens that I can live with versus having like a theater display in front of you in the new Mustang. Ace of Spades says, will you be reviewing the GV70 electric at some point? It looks pretty sweet, but perhaps a touch expensive. That's kind of what I've heard from some of my other reviewer friends. I don't know if I'm going to review that one. That's one of the ones, if you've, in the past, I've kind of discussed in past live streams how I say no to a lot of press vehicles and a lot of opportunities because it's stuff that I know has limited interest. And you're right, it's a little pricey. I personally would like to review it. I think it's actually a potential replacement for the Mach-E in a few years for Beth and I. So I'd personally really be interested in it. But the regular GV70 actually didn't do very well on my channel in general, and the electric version is just going to put an extra nail in that coffin. So I will probably turn that down if it gets offered to me, which will probably happen pretty soon. I'm probably not going to review it. So if it's something if a lot of you want to see it on here, then maybe I will reconsider, but I'm probably not going to do that one. I'm probably not going to do any of the electric Genesis aside from the GV60. I did that one already. And that also didn't do super well views wise. So another nail in the coffin there for that. So probably won't touch the other electric Genesis stuff, at least for now. Goth says, thanks for the CX90 review. It was really well done. You had so many models to cover. I wrote in the comments, if Mazda put that drivetrain and chassis in a sedan form, I would buy it. Great review. Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. And, I was talking to the Mazda engineer, and he's like, tell people to buy sedans. He's like, if we can make a business case for a sedan, we would make it. He would make a sedan. They can't justify it. I would argue, does Acura have enough sales of the TLX to justify that, or does Lexus have enough IS and ES sales to justify those? I don't know. I guess the advantage that at least Lexus has is they have, Toyota underpinnings to kind of spread out the cost a little bit. But Acura, the TLX is not an Accord underneath. I mean, it shares some components, but it is, heavily different underneath there. So, but with Mazda being a smaller company doing their own thing, they said they want to do a sedan. Trust me, they would love to do all kinds of stuff. So many of their, I was talking to a bunch of the engineers and people that worked on that car, on that event, and they're enthusiasts. They really love cars. They would love nothing more than to make, a bunch of new sports cars, sports sedans and stuff. It's just the business case, and getting it approved by the bean counters is the holdup, but I mean, most of these companies are run by enthusiasts, and they know all the wish cars on the, on the wish list that they would love to build. It's just, the market reality is they're holding them back. So it's one of those things, gotta buy sedans. And I mean, I can't preach about that because we just bought an SUV, with the Mach-E, but sedans, more people buy them, then that'll certainly help, keep that cause alive. Adam says, at least the Mach-E is a better name than a BZ4X. Alex Dykes calls it the Busy Forks. That's funny. I've never heard him say that. Yeah, that's true. I do not like the whole letters and numbers naming thing. Triton Car Guy says, well, I'm not a Prius guy. The new one is pretty good and will hopefully do well for Toyota. Oh, I think so. There's a lot of demand for the new Prius, wait lists and stuff. And they're also a little bit production limited too on like the Prime versions. That's going to be hard to get in the first year. I think they said they're doing like 10,000. They're going to build for this first model year. I think it's going up to 15,000 next year or something like that. So they're going to be a little bit tougher to get. The regular Prius will be a lot easier to get for sure. But even that, it seems like there's a lot of people that are excited about that. So it's going to be tough to get, but should be still a lot easier to get than like a GR Corolla or something. It's not that bad, but it'll still be tough to find. All right. And Trent Garguy says, frankly, I'm surprised they didn't jump for the Stallion name for the Dark Horse. Yeah, and who knows? Maybe they will someday down the road. We'll have to see. Linda says, I just look at it this way. By calling the Mach-E a Mustang, it gave Ford breathing room for other Mustang models. I always call it a Mach-E, but I'm also not mad at Ford. Yeah, and it gives them a little bit of breathing room. It also, it made people care about it, because if it was called, I think like what they originally were planning was what to call it the Ford Model E, but then just like they didn't think people would be that excited about it, and so the Mustang thing was what they needed to kind of drum up that excitement. Linda says, if I can't find a Prius Prime, what other car would you recommend? It really depends on what you're looking for. If you want something very similar to a Prius Prime, there's really not very many other plug-in hybrid sedans if that's what you're going for. There's like the Nero plug-in hybrid, and one or two others, but there's really not much out there. And that's kind of part of the appeal of the Prius Prime is, there's very few. And maybe some of you guys can chime in if there's others that I'm forgetting. But I mean, in the non-luxury segment, like Volvo does the S60 recharge plug-in hybrid. But there's really not a whole lot. So it's really going to come down to exactly what you're looking for, Linda. And if you want to send me a message on Facebook, I'd be more than happy to kind of talk you through, what you're looking for, and maybe, have a little more time to kind of dive into some other options that might be, better for you. And Adam says the electric GV70 is on my very short list to replace my Mach-E in a year or two. Great combination of performance and luxury, but only if they finally add wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Yeah, which I wouldn't hold your breath for the GV70. I mean, they're quick with implementing improvements, so it's not totally out of the realm of possibility, but it seems like from what I've seen so far, the new stuff getting that next generation system, if that even does have the wireless CarPlay, which, like I mentioned in the weekly update yesterday, that's not a guarantee. And so, we'll have to wait and see what ends up happening with that. But my bet is you will see wireless CarPlay on the next generation GV70 potentially, but I don't know if it'll be on this one. It sounds like someone's mowing the yard next door. So sorry for the extra ambient noise here. And Adam says, I never thought I'd say these words, but there will be some epic markups on the new Prius. Definitely. Yeah. And it's a crazy world we're living in. Like I said in the Prime review, me and Eric were like, we can't believe we're living in a world where we're all excited about a Prius, but crazy things are happening in the car world these days. Truck and Car Guy says he'd love for Mazda to bring back the Mazda Speed name. Me too, but in past interviews that others have done with their executives and their engineers and stuff, wow, they just hit something there with the lawnmower. But I think they previously said like they do not want to bring back the Mazda Speed thing because they are trying to go for this like premium luxury brand now. They want to compete with Acura and with Buick, I guess, or even kind of like Lincolns and Cadillacs and things like that. So the whole Mazda Speed thing and anything sporty in that matter, they like, for example, the only reason why they justified the Mazda 3 turbo is because they said, well, all the other luxury competitors, the Audi A3's got a turbo engine, the BMW 220 coupe thing, Grand Coupe, whatever, has a turbo engine, the CLA's got a turbo engine, so we have to give it a turbo engine. That was the only reason why they did it. If those things all has the same power as a regular Mazda 3, they would have never done a turbo version. It's just because they want the positioning. And I think the engineers again try to get into little things here and there where they could to make it a little sportier and try to do some type of Mazda Speed thing, inspired by Mazda Speed, I suppose, by giving it in the hatchback version and all that kind of stuff. But, again, the higher ups are just doing it for the premium, positioning there. So, all right, we got a bunch of other people here joining in. And so we have SLMD Sedan says, what's up, Matt? What are your plans for Easter? I'm just going to be hanging with family, of course, with our daughter. It's going to be fun, hiding the basket and having her run all around the house, finding eggs and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a fun day hanging out with family, and hopefully you guys all have a great Easter as well. Thanks for asking. And Pollock says, I'm looking a lot into the electric Dodge Charger. I'm definitely more interested in the Inline-six than the electric stuff. I'm hoping Dodge reveals the production version soon. Yeah, and the past reports have said there could be something showing up at the what do they call it? The Roadkill Nights thing during the Woodward Dream Cruise they do in August. So I would say August is when you can count on hopefully hearing something or getting some kind of info about what's going on with those things for the production version. But they could just show a new concept there too. So we'll have to wait and see what ends up happening, but hopefully we get some more solid info then. And Greg says, I just do not get the Prius pricing. It just seems high versus the competition. It's interesting. I thought the pricing was really good. What do you consider to be the competition, Greg? Because to me, there's really, not much competition. All the other competitors, like the Nero I just reviewed a few weeks ago, has 80 less horsepower. And that, the Nero that I had was 38 grand, and you can't even loaded up Prius is I think 35. The plug-in hybrid version will get to 40, but it undercuts the Nero, and you have way more power. I don't know. To me, I think the pricing is spot on for the Prius, but if you have some Camry is about the same price. Okay, Camry hybrid's not a blue. Gotcha. Yeah, well, those are a little bit larger. I think it. With those, you also have they're a different hybrid setup. So that uses the 2.5 and the Camry versus the 2-liter. And so I think the way that they're positioning it as the Prius, I think has the stronger electric motor, and you get the slightly better fuel economy. But okay, I could see if there's a few more features there with those larger vehicles. But I thought that the Sonata and the Camry could get up a little bit more expensive. But if you want the most space and stuff, those are still really good. And they're kind of the underappreciated vehicles in that segment of, very few people seem to be going for hybrid Camrys, surprisingly. It seems like the RAV4 hybrid is a lot more popular. But for Camry, it seems like a lot of people still just want the naturally aspirated, normal engines. Sonata with the, blue version there, the hybrid one, it seems like they're not selling a ton of those either for some reason. Because you're right, that is priced well. And like we talked about in the Ioniq 6 review, that makes it really tough to justify an Ioniq 6, unless you really want that electric thing. Otherwise, getting a loaded Sonata hybrid and getting really good fuel economy still is probably going to be, a better way to go for most people. But yeah, I can see your point about the Camry hybrid and the Sonata. I think it's just, again, it's the sportier thing. It's the smaller thing. I would argue that it probably is going to handle, it's been a few years since I drove a Camry hybrid, but it's going to handle probably better than those. And, you also have some stuff that I don't think the Camry offers a pano roof on the hybrid. I could be wrong. So I don't know, but I see what you're saying about those two. I always think of smaller stuff that's not in the midsize sedan segment as far as Prius competition. And in that regard, there's really not a whole lot. And again, whenever you're talking about the Prime, then you're really in an exclusive area where they don't have, a plug-in hybrid Sonata, at least not yet. There's no plug-in hybrid Camry. And so the Prime really carves out, I think a stronger case for itself there as well. But Zachary, thank you so much for a super chat here. He says, what's the latest on the chip shortage? It seems like things are improving. I know Honda had a huge jump in their sales this month because they're finally having their production kind of increase and starting to get some actual inventory on the lots there. So I think that they're certainly improving their situation. I think Toyota's still having some issues. What I heard, and this was almost a year ago that I heard this, but Toyota was planning, at least back then, to have full scale production and normal inventory levels again by this fall. So still, a few months away from that. Now that also could be further helped, and you might see inventory rise quicker than that just because of interest rates being so high. A lot of people being, unable to buy cars just because of either inflation and stuff or just interest rates or both. So I feel like we're going to start to see car sales drop off, but some brands like Honda, again, they're shooting up. So people are getting the money from somehow. I saw there's new stories this past week about how, people are just taking out longer, loan terms and just stretching that stuff out to get to that lower payment that they need to be at, which isn't a great combination if everyone's doing that in mass in a time when everyone doesn't really have very much money. So, repo rates are already way up and probably will just continue to get worse and worse. So we'll see what happens. But as far as chip shortage, I think it is improving. Hopefully by the end of this year, as long as, everything else stays chill in the world, we don't have any kind of other wars break out or anything. Hopefully we will get back to normal by the end of this year, for basically everybody, hopefully, at least as far as, car brands go. Yeah, they turned off the lawnmower, at least for now. And so let me see other questions here. I don't want to miss some member questions. Sean says, thanks for the membership. So yeah, thank you so much for gifting those. Bruce View says, hey Matt, what's the best and worst 0 to 60 launch you've experienced? That's a good question. You always have such good questions, Bruce. I'm trying to think the best and worst 0 to 60s. I would say one of the best ones. See, it depends on, there's different kinds of best. It's one of those things that's really hard to make a blanket statement about because, some stuff's really impressive, like, launching the new Shelby GT500 down the Las Vegas drag strip, the Las Vegas Speedway. Like that was probably one of my best, launches ever. We were pre-warming the tires and all that kind of stuff. So that definitely stands out in my mind as one of the more memorable and, impressive ones. But then, a lot of the electric stuff too, like I did the Tesla Model S P100D a few years back, and that was one of the fastest accelerating cars I've ever done. And that one certainly, was very, very impressive. Recently, the Audi RS e-tron GT that I reviewed last year, that one was very, very impressive. The Hummer EV that I did last year was hilarious with that, doing like a, 3 seconds 0 to 60 with that massive thing and lifting the nose up and feeling like it wants to do a wheelie. That was probably one of the crazier ones. As far as worst launches, if you're just talking about vehicles that are super slow, I mean, I think usually it's like if they're slow and they're also slow to react, or that it doesn't spring in and give me the input whenever I floor in the gas, I'm gonna wait a few seconds. But I'm trying to think of like which one was truly horrible. I don't remember off the top of my head like which stands out to me as like being like really the worst. I mean, obviously, any of the slow stuff out there that you see, that I've reviewed is obviously the least exciting. But I'm trying to think of anyone that was particularly bad. But I can't think of anything, honestly. I will get back to you if I think of something later on. But great question. Ace of Spades says Mazda Speed Miata 2.5 ND would be a good opportunity to bring it back. That would be sweet. That'd be a lot of fun. But I love the high revving nature of the ND too. With just having, I guess if you're saying like a 2.5 generation, but typically the Mazda Speed Miata has been turbocharged, and they could just drop the 2.5 turbo in there if they wanted. But I feel like it's just, I love the high revving nature of that ND2 motor so much that and they've pushed that motor, I think, a good bit already, that I don't know how much more they can get out of that. So we'll have to see, but that would be fun. Well, I'll be curious to see what they end up doing with the new Miata down the road. They didn't say anything or even hinted anything on this event. I don't think anyone really even talked about the Miata, honestly. But yeah, hopefully they do something good for that. And Goth Rocker says, Matt, I agree. Sadly, we probably won't see a nice luxury sports sedan from Mazda. I love my Lincoln Continental, but that died from not enough sales. At least my Subarus will always be around. They sell. Yep. Yeah. Subaru is on a roll, man. It's crazy how the Crosstrek is the #1 selling thing for Subaru now. Kyle, thanks for joining in here. He says, Mazda Vision Coupe concept from 2017. Mazda needs to make that their new sedan with that inline-six turbo engine. Yeah. And trust me, if they could get that past the bean counters, 100% they would do that for sure. I'm sure they would love to do that. And again, they made the concept; it's totally doable. And if you remember a while back in the weekly update, I covered how they were patented like diagrams and intricate engineering things. Like they were seriously working on stuff. So I don't know if they just did some engineering work, they're moonlighting on or something, just to hopefully show something more completed for some kind of business case, and it just didn't happen, or what the deal was with that. I'm still holding out a little bit of hope that maybe someday they will justify that as like a Halo car that's a big money loser, but it makes a splash for Mazda or something. But I'd love to be surprised, but I'm not optimistic. So Copper says, hey Matt, looking at a 2011 Nissan Maxima for sale. I don't know if you have any experience with that gen Maxima, but if you do you have any opinions, positive or negative? 2011 Maxima. So that would not be the most recent generation. And would it be the one before that? I'm trying to think. I'm foggy on those. So unfortunately, I do not have good insight on those at all. And if I have driven one, it's been probably a decade since I have. So I really can't give you any good advice on that, unfortunately. But generally, just with any vehicle in general like that, you make sure you go on the forums and see what owners are complaining about as far as, do they have transmission issues at older, higher mileage, intervals there? Are they solid vehicles? People generally like them. Do they not? Things like that can kind of help you get an idea if it's a good car to own. And of course, check out the Carfax and make sure it had good maintenance, all that kind of stuff done. But I'm sure you know all that stuff already. So as far as Maxima in particular, nothing else I can really add, unfortunately. And Truck and Car Guy says, I would consider getting a new car if I can afford it. Yeah, I think that's the experience of a lot of people these days. And I think that's why I'm excited that used cars are seeming to come down. They seem like they went down and they're starting to kind of level off and not continue their drop off. But I hope that used cars do continue to drop off here, just so that, people have more affordable options here going forward. Bruce said, any cars that made you do a double take recently? If you're meaning visually or like cars that like kind of caught my eye, I'm trying to think again if there's anything. You have such thought-provoking questions. I always need more time than I have here to really think through the answers. I don't think there's anything that I can remember off the top of my head that's made me do a double take. I always admire the Ioniq 5 when I see them on the road. And I'm starting to see them more and more often around here. Every time I see an Ioniq 5, I'm like, man, that's a good looking car. And then like I just saw a teal colored one at Target a few weeks back, and I was like, ooh, there's one in teal. Someone bought a fun color for those. That's cool. So that's one that I really have been admiring recently on the road. But I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Let me see here. So Golf Rocker says Copper and Nissan Maxima of that era, the CVT could be the main issue. That V6 has good torque, but sometimes the CVT can't take it over the years. Also, that era, they tend to eat through alternators. Thank you for giving the input there. I'm glad you guys are helping each other out here. And I kind of wondered if the CVT and those were iffy because, but I didn't want to be shouting Nissan CVT like Scotty Kilmer all the time. So, I've heard mixed things. You know, sometimes CVTs are awful and deserve all the hate they get. And then there's other times where some people are like, nope, I got a 2011 Altima and the CVT has been flawless for forever and ever. And maybe the V60 makes that worse than the Maxima. But you know, it's one of those things. No one ever has 100% the exact same experience across the board. There's always an outlier. It's just a matter of, you know, who's the bigger majority of, you know, experiences there. So Josh in Row says the car you would buy if you had unlimited funds. For me personally, if I could only have one car, unlimited funds, I mean, it's tough because I would want multiple cars. So it'd be one of those things where I'd be like, okay, if I could just get one car, I would like buy that one car and then sell it and buy like 30 other cars. You know, one of those kinds of things, because there's so many cars I would love to own. But if I could only have one and I had to keep it, and I had to like keep it, you know, for a long time, I would probably say, if I was adding it as a third car, you know, like I have the Bullet, and if I could keep that, and you know, Beth would have whatever car, you know, she'd have as, you know, the family car and stuff, then I would probably say Lexus LC500 convertible, because it's gorgeous looking. It has a back seat so I can take my daughter along, and it's a Lexus, so it'll last forever. And if you just saw, I didn't cover it in the weekly update because it just came out yesterday, but the LC500 is getting the touchscreen for the 2023, or I guess it'd be 2024 Prime model year at this point. Of the LC will have the touchscreen. I mean, I didn't mind the controller that much in that car because it was just such a great car that I was willing to excuse the annoyance of the little controller pad. But now with the touchscreen on that thing, having the new infotainment system, and then still having everything else be just as awesome, pretty much the perfect car in my mind. So LC500 convertible would be the way I would go. Jay agrees about the Ioniq 5 being awesome looking cars, but he said the interior sucks to him. The interior is weird, you know. I mean, we did a review on it. There's definitely some things I don't like about it, like the USB jack that's like in the floor if you want to use Apple CarPlay, and you know, some of the materials and stuff are a little odd with the choices that they did. You know, some parts of the interior kind of remind me like a mid 2000s like PT Cruiser or something like that. But then there's other stuff that I think is really great. I really like the interior though still. To me, I love the Ioniq 5. If it was me making the decision, because you know, Beth and I had to both come to an agreement about what we wanted for, you know, a family car. I might have considered the Ioniq 5 over the Mach-E personally. For her, she didn't like the looks, and I probably still would have leaned towards the Mach-E in general anyway, even if it was just my decision. But I may have been swayed to the Ioniq 5 potentially because I really did like it that much. Dom says there's too many amazing cars, brother. Yeah, there are so many good cars out there. We are spoiled for choice these days. Bruce says, how early do invites get sent out for car launch events? Typically a month and a half. If it's something that either the car company really wants to make sure that that person is at that event, or if it's something that takes a little more planning, if it's like an international trip or a longer trip, then they will sometimes send them out sooner. Or they will send a save the date at least, like, you know, put it on your radar so that you don't get booked up with something else. But typically most of my events come in, I'd say a month to maybe like a month and a half before they happen. But there is one exception, and I'm not going to say just yet because it's already booked, and it's something that, yeah, I've known about for a couple of months already. And it's one of these trips where it's further away, and it's something they wanted to make sure that we covered. And so it's something that's I got a lot of advance notice on that one, but a lot of the times it's usually just a month and a half, you know, ahead of time that you get that invite. Bruce agrees on the LC500 convertible. Yeah, they're awesome cars. I'm glad I'm not the only one. But Running Wild with Milwaukee Buck, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, what about the GV60 Coupe? I like the GV60 a lot. That's another one that you know, was in the running for us. It was just a little late with the timing, but whenever we actually had that as a press vehicle for a week before we got the Mach-E, and Beth really loved the GV60. Like, she was sad to give that one back. And so that's another one we're considering, you know, maybe as a potential replacement for the Mach-E down the road at some point. Because, you know, we really like that. They're really good cars. Copper says the car overall seems clean. Talking about the Maxima for the age, only 94,000 miles, same owner since 2013. Probably gonna look at it in person soon. Yeah, I mean, that's also usually a good sign. If it's, you know, a car that hasn't gone through 15 different owners, usually that's a good sign. Someone's actually cared for it and stuck with it for a while, and it's usually good. So it sounds like it's a promising car there. So good luck with that, Copper. Hopefully it works out. And Truck and Car Guy says he had a 2012 Sentra and had the CVT and hated it. Yeah, those early Nissan CVTs were definitely not a great experience, regardless of whether or not they're reliable. They just didn't, yeah, they didn't drive very well. And I kind of complained with that even in my earlier Nissan Rogue review from a few years back before they did the new generation Rogue. The new Nissan CVTs I actually think drive pretty nice. I think it's actually one of my favorite CVTs out there currently. It's just really natural feeling and responsive and less slushy than like the Subaru CVTs and a few others. But those earlier Nissan CVTs, though, yeah, not as good. Ace of Spades says, I'm a Miata owner, but I'm married and we have 2 kids. My wife wants a four-seater convertible. Are any of the 4-seater convertibles from BMW, Mercedes, Audi, etc., similar to Miata at all for driving fun? I mean, it's gonna be a way different experience. The only thing, I mean, if you can compromise on the convertible thing, the only thing I can tell you that you might be able to do, it depends on how big your kids are. But I would say GR86 BRZ is gonna be the closest you'll get to a Miata driving experience, and it's even pretty different compared to a Miata, honestly, just the way they have it set up, because those cars are a lot stiffer and just have higher limits and just feel a little more confidence inspiring. Whereas the Miata, they deliberately engineered it for lower limits to give you more fun at lower speeds. But I would say that is the only thing that comes close to Miata as far as driving fun that's non-exotic, because everything else is just gonna be bigger, heavier, more complicated, just a completely different experience than the Miata. So, I mean, they're fun, they're gonna be fun in their own ways. It's just that it's not gonna be Miata fun or the same, but that's okay. There's different types of fun, and you can enjoy different things in different ways, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's but yeah, I'm trying to think of any other 4-seater convertible though that would come, it would be a really good experience. But there's not a lot that I can think of. There's really not very many 4-seater convertibles aside from the more comfortable, luxurious stuff really these days. I was so hoping they would make the GT86 open concept, like 7 or 8 years ago when that came out, but they never made it. And I even told, I think, Toyota and Subaru when I was on the BRZ and GR86 events, I'm like, I'd love to see a convertible still. And I don't think they even really, I think they just laughed it off or whatever. But I still wish they made a convertible version of those, because if they did, that would be a car that I would really, because then I could justify having GR86 alongside the Bullet, because it'd be a different enough experience with the convertible and with still have a backseat, hopefully, so I could, bring the daughter along and all that. But yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. But I mean, those are all going to be great cars, Ace. And Running Wild with Mocking Buck, thank you so much for another super chat. He says, I meant the GV60 Coupe in yesterday's weekly update. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. You mean the GV80 Coupe then? Yeah, that came out yesterday. So yeah, I think that thing looks awesome. I'm pumped for that. I'm excited to see what the production version looks like. It sounds like someone commented, I think, in the update that it seems like the concept lights will probably not stick around. It'll still have a similar thing, but they're saying that the headlights themselves will probably be like what you see on the G90. And they'll put those in, so you have to have the actual projectors there versus, it seems like there was no actual headlight there, or they were just like accent lights, and that was it on the GV80 Coupe concept. But thank you so much for another super chat. Says, I'm surprised you're not at the New York Auto Show. Yeah, I'm not, because I wasn't hosted by a car company. The only way I go to car shows these days is if a car company hosts me, because otherwise I lose money going to a car show, because especially in New York, the sky high prices for hotels. I can drive to New York, so at least I don't have to worry about airfare. But even if I use points and flew to an auto show somewhere else, just hotel costs alone and food and stuff, I do not get views on my auto show videos. So it's a waste of money and also a waste of time. If I'm going to be spending, even if it's just one day, I only go, like I said, like I went to Chicago. That was because Toyota hosted me there for Grand Highlander. And I went to, LA and those others in the past, but only because someone else paid for me to be there. Otherwise, I don't go to car shows. I can't justify it. I wish I could. I tried doing it, in years past, and sometimes in years past, I, was able to make some money on the car show videos. But especially as new competition came in, and I quit getting the views that I was getting in 2015, 2016, 2017, stuff like that. I couldn't justify it anymore. It'd be fun to go though, but it's just one of those things I can't do stuff just for fun on this channel. I'm so busy that if it doesn't make sense from a business standpoint, I just don't do it. And Dom says, hey, I need some advice. I'll send you a message for more details. Looking for a fun car around $5,000. Yeah, definitely send me a message. We can go through it, Dom. I mean, off the top of my head, Miatas for $5,000 are always fun. Although finding a clean one for $5,000 these days might be tough. But there's definitely a lot of good options at $5,000. So it just depends on what you're looking for. But yeah, I'd love to talk with you more. So I'll check your message. I might be a little busy this weekend, but I will try and get to it as soon as I can here, and we can get into that. And Caleb says, sorry if this has already been asked, but thoughts on the Impreza 2.5 RS? Looks like driving impression videos are out, and under $30,000 price tag is nice. Definitely. And I was pleasantly surprised. That is one vehicle that they have booked me, and I got to do I have to do an updated schedule for you members of all the stuff coming up here in the next month or so. But I'm going to be getting an Impreza here in a couple of weeks to review, and that video should be going live. I'll have to see because I got to see where it was at in the schedule. But I will be doing a video relatively soon here on the new Impreza, and I'll be covering that. But it seems kind of promising. It's the cheapest thing with all-wheel drive you can get, and it just seems to be a pretty nice improvement. I'm still not in love with that huge touchscreen that Subaru has. It usually hasn't been a great experience, but as long as that doesn't bother you, it seems like a nice little car for sure, especially if you need the all-wheel drive. Jay says BMW 650 is a four-seater convertible. Yeah, and there's a lot of the German stuff. Getting back to the other question earlier there from Ace, there's all those companies have a couple different four-seater convertibles, and they're all fun again as long as you're okay with the higher maintenance costs of the German stuff. And yeah, so lots of good options out there. Dom says Facebook or email, either one. I'd say Facebook's probably a little bit easier to keep track of because in my email I just get buried with all kinds of emails from car companies and business stuff. So I typically try and keep other conversations to Facebook there, just so I don't end up having it get buried. Anthony, thank you so much for the super chat. He says Integra versus SI versus Elantra N-Line versus Forte GT. Trying to decide your thoughts. So I guess it's going to come down to, again, what the pricing is, because I see you're in Canada there from your super chat. So, I'm not familiar with what the pricing is like, comparing those. But if pricing, we'll just throw pricing out and just say based on fun to drive and the experience. I think as far as the Integra is going to be the most luxurious, obviously, it's going to be the one that has the most customization as far as the adaptive dampers. You don't get any of the others. The Integra is the nicest one, has a lot going for it. If money was no object, I'd say sure, go for the Integra probably. I think the SI though is a lot of fun for a good bit less money, at least here in the States. And Elantra N-Line, they're hard to find these days, at least in America here. Maybe it's a little easier to find in Canada, but yeah, Elantra N-Line's great. The only problem with that is it has rev hang. Forte GT, I've not driven the manual version, the DCT version. If you're going for that, it was great. It's a really good value. And I guess same thing, N-Line, Elantra. If you're going for the DCT and that, then it'll be fine too. But the manuals in those aren't a great experience. I think Forte GT should be the same as the Elantra N-Line. So yeah, if you're going, obviously, I'm guessing you're going for the manual if you're talking about the SI. So if you're going for a manual, I would say SI if you're trying to save a few bucks. Otherwise, go for the Integra. If you got the disposable cash, that would be kind of my advice. But I love the SI. I think it is more fun than the Elantra N-Line. The Elantra N-Line is still a better value if you can get around the rev hang and a few of the other things. But personally, my money, I would spend a few bucks extra for the SI over the Elantra N-Line, I think. And Dom, thank you so much for the super chat. He just says, thanks for doing more lives. Thanks for joining in all these lives. I'm just really happy that all of you guys are enjoying these as much as I am here. I was kind of, skeptical if, we'd have people turning up, week after week here and hanging out, but I'm so glad that many of you are. We'll see, once the weather gets warmer, I don't blame people for going out and enjoying their, weekend afternoon. See, we'll see how the viewership is. We might just make these a thing that is weekly whenever people are stuck inside for the most part, but I'm really glad you guys are joining, and I'll happily do these every week as long as you guys are into them. So let me see here, other questions. Jay says this year's New York Auto Show was lackluster. Yeah, it's just the problem with auto shows these days. They still haven't come back fully, and that's even like Chicago. There's just a few little things really quick that I covered at Chicago, and then I was out. I on the media day, it was kind of funny. Other people do more stuff, but I knew that I wasn't going to get any views on my auto show videos anyway. So I just filmed a couple of the big things that came out, like the Crosstrek came out in Chicago, and one or two others, and then I was out. I was like, sweet, I'm peacing out. I think I grabbed like a 1:30 flight, so I was gone before they were even done with the presentations, and I was already on a plane and headed home because I'm like, I'm not going to waste any time here. None of these videos are going to get views, and there's only 3 cars anyways. So it's just one of those things that I was able to be nice and quick and in and out. But yeah, I think companies are trying to get the car shows back, but it's also you're seeing more and more of these reveal events like the ones that I've been going on more and more, where that's the way to do it, because then you have the entire day to yourself. You're not fighting for coverage with a bunch of other journalists, and the manufacturers aren't fighting for coverage because you got 5 cars that debuted that day. You have just your day, your car, you get all the limelight, and it makes sense. And honestly, I think it saves these companies a good bit of money too, because a lot of people don't realize, but those huge displays at the auto shows cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like building a house basically, inside a convention center with how they do all this stuff. And it's really intricate. I guess they don't have to do something that crazy, but that's kind of what's expected these days, unless you're talking about a smaller dealer show where they just like park cars on carpet and call it a day. But, for these fancy things you see in New York and stuff, I mean, that is insanely expensive, and they could, still rent out some, like Mazda with the CX-90 for that reveal. They rent out some swanky Malibu house for however much that costs. They, hire the crew to, do all this stuff there, cater it and, do security and, drivers to transport us and all that stuff, and then fly us all out and then pay for a hotel and all that things. All that still is cheaper than a huge auto show display typically. So, I don't blame them if it's kind of a win-win for them. And it's unfortunate, but I think the value of car shows is really going to be the tire kickers that can just sit in cars, and you can just do that by having dealers, supply cars, and they get the leads anyway and stuff. And maybe have the manufacturer bring in a few cars, but the whole, glitz and glam of car shows, I think, is kind of never going to come back probably, which is sad to say, but it's just, I think they've just realized that there's a better way now, and it's just the way it is. Kyle, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, Matt, any cars you've noticed that are not selling well at local dealers? My Chevy dealer has so many Equinox RS models around 1520 sitting for weeks not moving. Interesting. I'm trying to think of stuff that's been sitting that I've noticed. Let me think about this for a second. So yeah, I mean, I don't drive by the dealer lots super often. We do have a bunch near me, but as far as stuff that's sitting, I'm trying to think. I don't think I can think of anything that's standing out to me as sitting. Yeah, I don't know. I know surprisingly, whenever the Genesis GV80s first came out several years ago, those were kind of taking a little while to move on the lots from what I was seeing. And then, of course, they kind of caught on as people kind of figured out what they were and that they weren't $300,000 Bentleys, and people are like, oh wait, I can get one of those for 50 grand. Sweet, sign me up. And then they started selling super quickly. Because it still, I think, looks like a Bentley. Honestly, they just look so nice. But I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. But I've heard that Ram is doing more incentives because there's some of their stuff sitting. I know Chevy idled the production for their trucks because they said they want to maintain an optimal inventory level. So I think they want to make sure they don't have to start doing incentives. So they're just like, we're just going to cut production, which typically was a bad idea because then you're missing out on, those union workers still going to be getting paid, even if you decide to idle the line and stuff. So, there's some of that usually they had a balancing act there, but it seems like now they're just like, nope, we're just not going to build cars and just keep those inventories lean. So we'll see how that plays out. But, I think that's why, it's good to see there's some inventory stacking up like you're seeing there, because that's how you get the deals. If you got those cars sitting around, then all of a sudden there's motivation again to bring those deals back and actually get stuff affordable for people again. And thank you so much once again for the super chat, Kyle. And also thanks, Kyle, for buying a hoodie. I saw your comment on the weekly update as well. Thanks for grabbing a hoodie. Anyone else, by the way, if you missed in the weekly update, the merch site that I have my store on, Spring, it used to be called Teespring, now it's Spring. They're doing a 25% off thing, so they're paying for that discount, so it doesn't, it's not coming out of my pocket, thankfully. But if you always wanted merch, but it was a little too pricey for you for whatever reason, I just have it, priced, so that it's basically covering the cost of it for the most part. But if you wanted to grab some merch, 25% off. I think that it's like Friends and Fans 25. The discount code is on the weekly update there, as a pinned comment if you're curious. But anyway, thanks for buying the hoodie, Kyle. I really, really appreciate it, and hope you enjoy it. I still love mine. It's a nice, comfy hoodie. But anyway, let me see. Bruce says, I have a huge appreciation for car design and have begun to start drawing my own cars. Have you dabbled with sketching cars? That's awesome that you are good at drawing. I am not good at drawing. So my sketching of cars is on the sidewalk in our house, outside of our house with our daughter, just drawing with chalk there. And my cars look hilariously bad. So no, I do not. I would love to try and do something like that, but just do not have the skill of drawing. And so not something I've ever dabbled in. Ace of Space says, got to run and take our girls to Easter egg hunts. Thanks for the chat and have a happy Easter. You as well. Thanks so much for joining, Ace. And yeah, we did the Easter egg hunts last weekend and the weekend before. We did 2 back to back, but there weren't any this weekend, so we were clear. But enjoy those Easter egg hunts. They're so much fun. All right, and Copper says Canadian spec SIs get heated seats and envy of us in the US. Yeah, that is a nice thing. And I think there's a couple other things they get still too, right? But yeah, it's interesting the way they package them here in the States. But it's great that you guys get that. And that's another reason, I guess, if you're talking about Canadian SI, there's less incentive to go for the Integra in that case. But I think Integra is also closer in price there, if I remember correctly. So let me see here. All right, I got all right, let's see, we have another super chat. Sorry, I'm getting caught up on comments here. There's a bunch more that loaded. So thanks so much for another super chat. Running Wild with Mocky Buck, I appreciate it. He says, a guy once bought a Maserati from Carvana and it was stolen. Did you hear about that, Matt? I also hear that Carvana is struggling. Yeah, actually, so Beth was watching Reels last night on Instagram and came across that one, so we were both watching it there. And yeah, I had heard about there. I think there was a news story coverage about that, but then I saw the video there, and yeah, that's crazy. That's I don't know about Carvana. I've heard some sketchy stuff about Vroom as well as far as titling stuff, but yeah, it doesn't seem like Carvana is a great place to buy a car, unfortunately. It was a promising concept. Aside from the vending machines, they were cool, but it seemed like a giant waste of money. But yeah, I've been hearing more and more horror stories about Carvana. So yeah, I don't think they will be around in a few years. We'll see. But if they do stick around, they will get bought out by CarMax or something like that, I'm guessing. But hopefully someone, gets them back in line so they're not, just having these, crappy and sketchy cars that they're selling. All right, let me see here. Some other questions. So Jason says we have a Camry XLE and a few gas Highlanders that have been sitting a bit at my dealer. Oh yeah, so Jason works at a Toyota dealer. So thanks for the input. That's cool. So a few gas Highlanders and the Camry. Yeah, and I know, so my brother-in-law works at a Toyota dealer as well, and I just looked at their inventory this past week, and I think they have a lot of Tacomas sitting around, and that will probably continue to be the case, especially now that they're officially teasing the new Tacoma. I typically Tacoma buyers aren't looking for the hottest new thing. If they were, they wouldn't be looking at a Tacoma in general, but I think that's going to be one that'll probably, be starting to sit, especially once the new ones come out. So you're probably going to see some incentives on Tacomas, I'm guessing, for the old generation here. But it's interesting that, the gas Highlanders are sitting. Yeah, my brother-in-law, he basically, their dealer, unfortunately, they still do markups on hybrids and anything that's high demand. And so that's why I have not recommended his dealer to anyone local, because I can't recommend a dealer that does markups. But at least they said they've moved off markups on the regular gas-powered stuff, and they see some less demand there for that, because the hybrids are the hot thing at Toyota, because they're kind of exclusive with the way they do more hybrids than everybody else as well, and they're really good hybrids too. But it's interesting though that there's less demand for gas and there's more demand for the hybrid stuff. So contrary to everyone's like, oh, we all want our gas guzzlers, like everyone in the comments on yesterday's weekly update. Clearly there's a lot of people that still want to get good gas mileage and want something more eco-friendly, I guess, for whatever reason. And so yeah, it's interesting to hear that. Thanks for chiming in, Jason. Jay says GR86s are not selling well. Interestingly, because I thought I heard that they were doing pretty well with sales. I know they sold I think double the BRZ last year. But they were never going to be a volume seller. I think from what I saw, they're doing about as good as the last generation, though. Maybe things have changed recently. I'll have to look into the sales data. So thanks for bringing that to my attention, Jay. But I thought they were doing okay. But I know they do have some lease deals on GR86s. And again, I still so desperately want one of those cars that as you can see, I mean, I'm literally wearing a GR shirt. But so yeah, it's one of those things that's tempting. It's like the lease deal on a GR86. If I do like an ultra low mileage lease for like, $400 a month or something, it's like, like I would never have time to drive it. I don't even have time to drive the Bullet. So it doesn't make any sense, but it's still something I think about more than I should, because I'm just like, well, maybe I can justify this somehow. Cause yeah. And especially if they can get better lease deals, because they start sitting around more, that could, that could just make the temptation even worse. So let me see here. So thank you so much for another super chat, Kyle. He says, I really hope Dodge adds the gas-powered engine you mentioned in the weekly update. I think that will shake up the market for sure. Have a good weekend, Matt, and everyone. Thanks so much for joining, Kyle. And yeah, I think it's great to give people choice, though. That's the thing. I think, it might just be a little bit of a bridge too far for Dodge, especially with their buyer demographic, to do, just go cold turkey and cut the gas altogether. I think, transitioning into some, plug-in hybrid Hellcat would be an easier thing to swallow for some people, I think, than just going straight to the electric thing 100%. So we'll see. I mean, we know that, it's inevitable. All of these companies have that target of, going fully EV eventually. But we still got plenty of years to, sell some plug-in hybrid stuff and regular hybrids, or even just gas guzzlers. There's still plenty of time. So, let me see here, though. Thank you so much, though, for another generous super chat, Kyle. I really, really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to miss my spot here in line with these questions. Let me see. So yeah, everyone's talking about Camry seems to be selling a little slower. It's just, I think Camry, everyone else has refreshed refreshed their competitors, and the Camry's just kind of sat around, got the bigger screen a couple of years ago, but they haven't done anything. Like, they haven't even changed the looks. Like, typically you change the looks, 3 or 4 years in, they didn't even bother with that, and so it's kind of tough to justify, the Camry these days, unless you're going for the Tier D version, which has that, V6, which is getting more and more rare. But aside from that, it's just like, it's tough to recommend it. I mean, obviously it'll run forever, but if that's not your main, selling point, then, it's just going to be tough, because everyone else is just so much fresher. So I'm sure there'll be some good deals on Camrys this year, as a result. And Bruce says, how surprising was that 4 GT debut to you back in 2015? That was a fun one. That was the 2015 Detroit Auto Show was one of the most memorable ones. That, and then the one when they debuted the Bullet at the 2018 Detroit Auto Show. Those were the two, I think, best auto shows I've ever been to, and the most exciting ones for me. But yeah, that 4 GT, that was wild. I remember, it was electric in that place when that came out. I mean, we all kind of got goosebumps, because it was just like so mind-blowing. And it's something that shocked even Ford people. Like, I remember other Ford people being like, what? Like, we had no idea about this either. So, I mean, it was just, yeah, that was so exciting. And then that also it was an exciting one too, because, just seeing it come out, and then just the people, as where I met Shmi 150 for the first time. And so, seeing that, I was fortunate to be one of I think 2 or 3 people that filmed that car start up for the very first time. And that video got 500,000 views in a week, and was back in the heyday when I could actually have videos go viral and stuff. But that was a lot of fun too, is seeing everyone, share those videos and the hype around that car, and it being, fresh hype. It's not like everything these days where there's a million teasers and everyone's bored of it by the time it actually gets debuted. This was no teasers, nothing. And so it's this shock value. And so there's just this rapid ramp up of interest. And so anything covering that just was easy, hundreds of thousands of views without even trying, because it was just no one had seen it before, and everyone was clamoring to see more. And it was really, really exciting. So that was a lot of fun. 2015, there was also a few other big debuts, I think, that year. And that was also the year, Jerry Seinfeld walked past me at the auto show. And there's just all these cool little things. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, was at that one. So it was all kinds of cool stuff. You kind of do at those auto shows the way they used to be again, back in the heyday. Well, again, never see again, I don't think. It's sad. All right, let me see here. Other questions don't want to miss here. All right, so talking about the Camry here, and So Dom says you have a brother or a brother-in-law. It's just my brother-in-law. Sorry if I misspoke. Yeah, I have a sister, but only a brother-in-law. So a couple brother-in-laws technically. So, but yeah. Sorry if I was unclear there. Goth Rocker says I talk close with my local Subaru dealer and Ford Lincoln dealer. Subaru dealer sadly has 14 WRXs sitting on the lot. There's a waiting list for Crosstreks. No joke. Beers he sell at his dealer. That's great. Interesting about the WRXs there though, because I've seen that they're selling really well. They kind of got off to a slow start, I guess, because of production stuff, and also people just kind of stomaching the looks. But I think now they've been selling really well. But what I've heard is that the WRXs have been selling well because they're actually selling at sticker or under sticker. There's a lot of people saying they're getting discounts on WRXs, and especially if you're seeing they're sitting on lots, then you're definitely going to get discounts on them. Versus SIs still are marked up most places, or a lot of places, I'd say. All the other sporty stuff is going for higher prices. And if you can walk onto a Subaru lot, you got 14 WRXs to pick from, and they're throwing money on the hood. Like, yeah, I mean, that makes it so much easier. If you can get a mid-grade WRX for close to the same price as a Civic Si, then like, yeah, at that point, it's a no-brainer. Go for the WRX, even if you don't care about all-wheel drive or anything. And I'd say the shifter and the driver inputs are much better than the Civic Si, but the WRX is still a really fun car, really good, solid value, especially, again, if you can get a cheaper one. The more expensive ones are a waste of money, in my opinion, because it just balloons in price way too much. But if you're okay with a pretty bare bones WRX, then it's a great bargain, especially if they're getting discounts and you got a bunch to pick from. So that's interesting to hear. Thanks. I get more info from these live streams. It's so great to kind of get a good cross section of what people are actually experiencing, because it's really illuminating. But yeah, the waiting line for the Crosstreks. What a world that Crosstreks are selling hotter than WRXs. I mean, I guess it makes sense. The WRX has been more niche, but still, it's just wild. And I will be doing a Crosstrek review of this new generation for anyone that's curious. They're going to send me one. I think it's like June or something, so it's going to be a while. But I will have a Crosstrek review coming eventually, and I'm sure they'll send the wilderness version at some point as well. I'm going to be like borderline embarrassed to be driving that one, because you saw the weekly update yesterday. It's like they have Subaru across the back bumper, like enormous, and it's interesting with how bold they went for that. I mean, I guess I got to respect the guts, but it's I don't know, that one's gonna be for extroverts only, I think. So let me see here. Jason also says I should mention we just got our first GR Corolla yesterday, and it was pretty dang cool to see. That's awesome. Congrats on getting one of those in. And yeah, my brother-in-law's dealer, they sold their first one a few weeks ago, and I think someone actually leased it, surprisingly enough, which I feel like that kind of a car should probably hold its value pretty well, but they ended up going for a lease. But yeah, that's I'm glad to see they're starting to trickle in here. I'm hoping to still get one as a press vehicle, because I've still only driven it on track and on the ring road around the track, and that's it. So I really still want to actually live with a GR Corolla and see what it's like to drive on normal streets. Hopefully that'll happen this summer, but still waiting on that one. And Running Wild with Mockingbuck, thank you so much for another super chat here. He says, why didn't Ford put the V8 in the Ford GT? I believe it was a homologation thing for the Le Mans car they wanted to do, and for doing that whole all the racing stuff, I believe, was the reason why. And I think they also just said they didn't have a V8 that could do what that motor could do, at least at that point in time. And so obviously they could have just made it slower and made it less impressive, but I think it was mostly about the racing thing and designing that car again for the plumbing, for the turbos and stuff, and having that better efficiency and stuff. I think those were the reasons why, but I'm a little foggy on that because it's been several years. But I believe that was the reasoning. But thank you so much again for the super chat there. And let me see here. Two Chang's in the house. Thanks for joining too. He says, will these car companies making new i6s, or with these companies making new i6s, should Toyota make a modern hybrid 2JZ? That would be awesome. We'll see now that Akio Toyota's out. I mean, obviously Koji Sato is still a huge enthusiast and racer, but we'll see how they change their direction. There's all these talks they're going to be doing more and more electric stuff now with the new leadership. So we'll see. I think Toyota and Mazda still have a partnership, and that's kind of what I was hoping, and what I've seen with other reports a few years back was that the rumor was the next generation Lexus IS would share a platform with a Mazda sedan. They would get this new, engine and platform from Mazda, And, then they would really have a very impressive new IS as well to go along with it. And, that's a partnership I could totally get behind. I think that would be awesome. I don't know if there's, if that ended up getting canceled, if that was never a thing, or if that still is a thing. I have no clue. But that is, I think, your best hope of seeing a new turbo inline-six exclusively, or, built or engineered or something from Toyota that's not just bought from BMW. I think that's really your only hope, is if they end up striking a deal with Mazda still. Other than that, I don't think there's any way, unless there's some radical change in the world as far as, not just talking about America, but radical change across the globe as far as emissions targets, emissions, technology, all of these types of things. Unless there's some massive breakthrough that happens really quickly, and even still, it's too late to reverse course for a lot of these huge investments. So it's going to be like we have this phase at least of electric stuff. What happens after that, I don't know, but I don't think we're ever going to see any kind of thing like that again, most likely. And Jason remembers that Ford GT debut video, and so that was very fun. Yeah, that was good times, man. That was a fun memory. Thanks for bringing that up, Bruce. That was good times, man. It's been so much fun doing this channel for all these years. So many fun, amazing experiences that I just have to pinch myself and be like, I can't believe, these are things that, I got to do and that we all got to experience, with, a brand new Ford GT supercar from Ford, and, them winning, the races the way they did, and just kind of repeating history again. And just so many awesome things that have happened. I really think the 2010s was such a golden era for automotive development, and just the crazy things that came out, the Hellcats, and just the whole paradigm shift as far as what you should expect out of a muscle car, and just all the new advancements of everything. It's just been, man, it's been such a fun ride. All right, so Copper says Honda did the same thing with the 10th gen Accord, where they barely changed it throughout the years. A 2018 looks basically the same as the 2022. Yeah, I think that definitely they changed the looks a lot more than they did with the Camry, where they did nothing aside from special editions. But yeah, I think I'll have to see. I'm going to be driving on Accord finally next week, so I will see how that feels and report back. But I'm sure it's not going to be massively different from the old one. But at least they went for the new style, improving the interior, making things a little bit nicer, improving the hybrid and all that kind of stuff. At least they did a lot more than Toyota has done with the Camry, for sure. All right, so I think we're just behind on comments here. So Jay's saying the GR86 is better than the BRZ, but it's on pace to sell less units than last year. Interesting. Okay, well, thanks for the insight, Jay. I appreciate that. It's I guess it's one of those things you get the early adopters that all jump on, and then beyond that, it's just a matter of trying to justify it for the other people out there that might not be clamoring for one still. So yeah, but I'm glad everyone's already at least getting them, and we'll see. We saw a similar thing with the last generation as well, where the first model year or two model years, they sold really, really well, and then they kind of trickled off after that. And that's why Toyota and Subaru have been focusing on the special editions that they've had over the years to try and keep it fresh, try and bring things in. And I think hopefully there'll be some more of that. There's rumors that we might see some kind of sportier version, something that maybe uses the GR Corolla motor or something. Again, those rumors might be a little more out there, but hopefully there's something that happens. I mean, now that we got the 2.4 liter, they could try and do something as far as a turbocharged version if they want to reroute it. But I think even that's a tough uphill battle. And I even remember talking to a Toyota employee a while back who wasn't an engineer, but someone who was just like, to put the turbo in that car, if you want to do it from an OEM standpoint, you got to really just change so many things. You got to raise the dash up because you got to lift the engine up a little bit. And so if you lift the engine up a little bit, then, you got to raise the seating position, you got to raise the dash and everything, and just throws everything off. So I don't know if we'll ever see a turbo version of those cars, but, maybe things have changed, or things will be a little bit different if they do, the GR Corolla motor instead, have a little more space to work with, possibly. I don't know. Sean says, do you think Toyota will be able to meet the demand of the new Prius Prime? Probably not. It's one of those things. I think they said they're planning 10,000 units this year. I think 15,000 next year. It's gonna be a little tough to come by, just like the RAV4 Prime. So I think Toyota, they see that obviously the biggest sales are the regular hybrids. That's the biggest draw for them. So that's the priority. And so, I think Prime's going to be a little bit tough to come by. I think it'll certainly be better. I think they did like 4,000 RAV4 Primes in the first year. So it's certainly better. They're getting better. They're trying to get these things out. It's just, again, getting the materials, there's just still, supply constraints for them. I think a little bit with that too. And so, some of that stuff, the battery stuff, someone was asking earlier about the part shortages. And as far as, chips and stuff, that'll be resolved probably by the end of this year, almost entirely. But as far as the battery materials for any of these things, whether it's the small stuff like the Prime or, big EVs, it's just going to be tough to get the battery materials for the foreseeable future. So that's going to be the biggest, supply constraint for all these things that are electrified. So Raphael says, I'm glad you're doing 2 hours this time. I had to leave and pick up my sushi. Oh, nice. I love some sushi. That's great. Hopefully I'll be able to join here and keep watching. But glad, doing it for 2 hours. It's good because I get to answer more questions and just more fun hanging out with you guys here. So I'm happy to do it. Goth Rocker says the Subaru dealer sells its sticker and offers great service, gives discounts. They sold 5 WRXs in February and March. February is when my mother bought her new Crosstrek. Congrats to her. Good to see that, at least they're selling some WRXs and it's not upsetting people too much, I guess, with the styling on those. Dom says, I just noticed your GR shirt. Awesome. I was confused about your brother because I know you have a sister that worked with you. Yeah, she still does the rolling shot. She's the one who, puts the camera out the window there whenever we do those rolling shots with the press vehicles and stuff. So we still do that basically every week whenever I have a press car. Trucking Car Guy says Subaru pulling a Toyota with the name on the bumper. Yeah, kind of. It's kind of pulling a Raptor, pulling all kinds of stuff with that kind of bold lettering there on the back. It's almost like a pickup truck or something. Goth Rocker says, as everyone already knows, I hope Mazda makes a new Mazda 6 sedan with all-wheel drive in the Inline-six. It'll be very sharp looking and probably have the underpinnings for be one of the best sedans. Yeah, it'd be awesome. I would love to see it. It'd be so fun. Spy Harpy says, was away from your podcast for a bit, but your current thoughts on the Tesla Model 3 performance. Your review from years ago was great. I ordered one this week. Well, congrats on the order. That's awesome. I mean, these days, they're a really solid value. And that's something I talked about even, if you watch my Hyundai Ioniq 6 review I did this week. It's like, 55 grand. If you're going for a loaded Ioniq 6, you get a way faster Model 3 performance for the same or slightly less money. And, they're still eligible for the tax credit, I think, for the next however long, but like next 10 days or something until they change the rules. If you can get one, especially if you can get one with the tax credit, but even without the tax credit, the pricing is just so good on those right now that, it totally makes sense that everyone's running and buying Teslas again because they're really doing well with the pricing finally. For so long they were so expensive and getting crazy and the value was not there, but now it's definitely come back and it'd be a nice car to revisit and do another Model 3 performance at some point, but it seems like they haven't really changed that much about it, so I don't know if it's warranting another review. Hopefully they'll change the looks at some point. Congrats on the order and hopefully you enjoy it. They're fast, they're awesome, really good cars, so I'm sure you'll enjoy yours. Mike says, do you think it was a miss from Ram to not make an ICE midsize truck? Do you think the 1500 switches to the Hurricane for the 2025 model year at this point and not 2024? Is there a chance that they give it the high output? So as far as the Ram midsize truck, I think they've been missing the boat ever since the Dakota went away. All of these years, people still wanted midsize trucks, and I don't know why everyone kind of abandoned the segment. But I'm glad to see them coming back. But they could have been just killing it on sales if they would have. Because the Ranger was so. The powertrain was good in the Ranger for this, current, I guess, generation. But it's just like the styling was, 10 years old from the, European version and stuff. It was just like not a competitive product in my opinion in most ways. And then you have, just Tacoma just kind of walking away with the sales because it was just bulletproof and. That buyer doesn't really care about having the newest thing, but I think Ram could have done really well. And it's unfortunate that, they're just going to do the electric thing. That certainly makes sense for the future, but I think they could have still sold. Like you're seeing with the new Colorado and stuff here, they're still doing a new generation. I think it would totally make sense to do a gas, generation of something, or even if they didn't want to do a midsize, they could do something like a Maverick competitor and, bring one of those Fiat Toros or something over, put a Ram badge on it. That might be, hearsay to some people, but that would even sell, I think, So It's kind of strange they neglected to do that. As far as the 1500, I think you're going to see V8s in trucks for a long time because they're in a different EPA class. So as far as the CAFE and the ZEV, restrictions and all that kind of stuff, I think the trucks, are kind of in their own world, so they can kind of continue to be the gas guzzlers that no one really bothers with from a restriction standpoint. So I don't know. I think Ram will probably stick with the V8. I mean, they might offer the Hurricane like you're seeing. Again, I guess because you're seeing how the Wagoneer, the Grand Wagoneer now is going from the V8 to the Hurricane motor. So I guess there's a chance they could offer in the 1500, but especially in a truck buyer, there's a different precedent with the Wagoneer because you already have like the Navigator having the twin turbo V6 and stuff as well. So it was a little less likely to ruffle feathers in the Wagoneer. In the Ram, if they get rid of the V8, I mean, there would be a lot of people that are upset about that. So I think the V8 will stick around. And you're even seeing, Chevy's investing in a brand new small block V8 for the next, 12 years here. And they said they know that 2035 is their cutoff for gas stuff in general. But between now and 2035, they think they can sell a lot of gas powered trucks. That's why they're doing a brand new V8. And so I don't know. Like I said, they could maybe offer it in the Rams, but I don't think they're going to get rid of the V8. I think the Hurricane motor could maybe be a fun addition, but I don't think I've actually even heard rumors about that. Maybe I'm just not up to date on that, but I don't know. I don't think there's any future for a Hurricane motor in the Ram currently. Linda says they don't even sell the Prius Prime in Virginia. Interesting. I think, yes, Toyota, someone asked at the Prime event if it's going to be sold in all 50 states. And I think that they said it's going to be sold in like 38 states or something. It's going to be sold in most states. I think it's just the states where they don't see very much purchasing of plug-in hybrids. But I mean, then again, Virginia, like they totally sell a lot of plug-in hybrids in Virginia, I think. So I don't know about that's crazy. They don't sell in Virginia. I don't know why they wouldn't. But the good news is if you really want one, you can just go to a neighboring state. I mean, same thing like the Genesis GV60. If Beth and I were going to get one last year, they weren't selling them in Pennsylvania, and they still don't sell them in Pennsylvania. So we would just drive to New Jersey and get one there, and road trip at home. So that's the kind of thing I always suggest. Don't let that stop you if you really want it. Just go to the nearest state where you can get one. Goff the Rocker says, yeah, man, I remember when you showed the stunning Ford GT at the auto show. I think it was amazing. Ford made that car. I love the look. I read that the V8 they felt was a downgrade and added weight. Yeah, and that's what they've said about the Raptor, and then they changed course with the Raptor R. But it was like, oh well, the V8 can't do what the turbo V6 can do. So that's that was their justification all these years. And they say the same thing with the Bronco. They're like, if we could get a V8 in the Bronco that did as well as this 2.7 EcoBoost motor, then we do it. But they just, in their opinion, that motor is better. And I think they kind of softened up a little bit with the Raptor R, but they're still in this tunnel vision of this is better, so therefore this is what we're going to offer. And it's kind of and it's a mindset that other manufacturers and other regions also have the same kind of thing where like this is what we're doing. We don't care what people want. But I think that's what you saw with the way Dodge capitalized on Challenger and Charger and all this, is listening to what people actually wanted. If people want a V8 Bronco, even if it is worse, put a V8 in the Bronco. I mean, I think the real reason is, again, they're worried about their ZEV status and the CAFE, standards and things like that and all the extra fines they'll get. But if it truly is that they think that the V8 is worse than the EcoBoost motor, it doesn't matter if it's worse. Again, the customer's the one paying for it. And if they want something that's slower, less efficient, and worse in basically every way as far as drivability, it doesn't matter. Put it in there if that's what people want. I don't know. To me, that would just be an easy money printer. Dom says, I know you're always busy. Thank you for your time. I've appreciated you for 8 years. Love you. I appreciate that, Dom. Thanks so much for watching all these years. It's very, very humbling. And I very much appreciate your support. I know so many of you have been watching for so many years, and we're talking about videos from 2015. I think there's very few channels out there these days, or even were around in 2015, but who have fans that have still stuck around and are remembering all these things. It's really, I think we have a really unique community here. It's really fun. I love what we've built here, and it's why I love these live streams. I could talk to you guys all day. It's so fun, just kind of going back and forth with all of you. Jajuk says, thoughts on a similar price of 65 grand between new M2 and C8 Stingray. If at sticker, which would be your pick? It depends on how much you like oversteer. If you like oversteer, the M2, I have not driven it yet. I will be thankfully driving one thanks to another member who offered their vehicle. I'll be reviewing that here in a few months. But as far as if you like oversteer, go for the M2 because it has, you know, a typical kind of front engine rear drive setup that's more prone to that. C8 Stingray does not like stepping out. It is very composed. It is very much a car that if you like the whole point and shoot, like 100% traction all the time kind of feeling, the C8 is going to be the way to go for that. They're both very impressive. They do things in different ways, you know, and I think the C8 is going to feel more special because, again, you feel like you're in a supercar because it's mid-engine and, you know, super low to the ground, all that kind of stuff. M2 is going to be easier to live with, you know, as far as having a back seat, being a little higher, a little more comfortable. That's a tough decision. So it's really going to come down to your personal preference between those two. And Caleb says, I was about to say the same thing. I don't know why, but your channel is the only one I've been consistently subscribed to and consistently watched. Well, that means a lot. I really appreciate that, Caleb. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing right, but I'm just thankful that I've, you know, been able to keep doing this and that you guys continue to enjoy and watch the channel. Again, even though the channel is in a little bit of a decline, you know, we'll see how much longer, you know, I keep going with it, but really happy that, you know, I'll always keep doing videos, even if I can't do it full time anymore. You know, I'll still always just do it for fun and keep you guys posted on, you know, the car world as best I can, you know, even if I'm not doing it full time. But I hope I can do this forever because it's just so much fun. And I'm so glad so many of you sticked around for so long as well. Truck and Car Guy says, if I know anything about full-size truck buyers, if it isn't a V8, they aren't interested unless it's a diesel. Yep, that's the truest thing. Yeah, there's no arguing that. That's going to be one of those things you cannot sway people from, I think. Married with Crypto says, Matt, I just bought a 2022 NSX Type S, added it to the CT5V Blackwing. Car is nuts. Whew, man, you got quite the garage. I am jealous. That is awesome. Congrats on the NSX Type S, and also congrats on your excellent taste in cars. I'm biased, but in my opinion, a lot of people slept on the NSX, and I just commend you for recognizing its awesomeness. And CT5V Blackwing, everyone seems to love. But I mean, that is my dream dad car. If I could have, you know, one car that had to do everything, CT5V Blackwing, 100%. Man, you must have so much fun on your daily drives between those two. Man, what a garage. That is awesome. And congrats to you for getting to that position to be able to get those cars. That is sounds like a ton of fun. Oh man, thanks for the comment. Mike says, I haven't seen any rumors. I just assume Ram was switched for cafe purposes since they're already paying a ton to other brands to buy credits. Yes, which is definitely true, but it's mostly for their smaller stuff. Whenever you're talking about heavy duty stuff, especially, so maybe they would do it in the 1500, just not in the 25 and 35. But I think even the 1500, once you're talking about true truck classifications, you know, you have more lenient standards. Maybe I think the EPA is working this week on coming out with new standards for 2027 to 2032. And maybe if those standards all seem more aggressive, then maybe Ram will consider it. But, you know, between now and 2027, even we got, you know, an election coming up and things like that, things could change, you know, so we will see. I mean, some of these brands, you know, they still are going to do things for an international reason, and they'll do things, you know, independent of what the U.S. government dictates. But there is certainly some influence there as far as that goes as well. So, that, you know, I think that might be a wait and see thing as far as, you know, that goes. And maybe we'll see it in a few years. But I feel like they're not getting penalized too much for the trucks just yet. But I could be wrong. I'm not as up on that kind of stuff as like Alex from Alex on Autos is. He knows all that info about all those legal, you know, restrictions and all the rules and all that. I'm not as up on that as he is. And Caleb says it's also not going to be a common sight to see the new Silverado EV doing any actual truck work. Definitely true. Same goes for any of those electric trucks. I mean, but really, even for the gas stuff, how many people buy $100,000 gas truck and then do any real work in it, you know? And speaking of Alex, I think he always jokes about how he'll go to his local Walmart or any, you know, large shopping area and just walk around and see all the perfectly pristine tow hitches on all these trucks and large SUVs, and how some of them even will have the ball, you know, hitch kind of receiver thing. And those are all spotlessly, like, you know, polished chrome, like never been used a day in their life. You know, it's one of those things in America, especially, where everyone likes to have more capability than they're ever going to use. And so it's just one of those mental boosts of like, oh, I could do this. But, you know, I think I can't remember. I saw a statistic a while back about how many people have ever done anything truck related in their truck. And it's like a tiny percentage. Maybe it's like 20%. I feel like it's even less than that, but I mean, it's like hilarious how few people actually use their trucks for what they're meant for. And I think so. Even like my wife, I think there was a friend of hers at one point that like said they were getting a Tacoma, and I was like, oh, why are you getting a Tacoma for? I think she did like a Facebook post about why she's getting a Tacoma, and it was like because she may have to haul a mattress like once or twice in her life, or she might move in a few years, and so better get a truck now and get 18 miles the gallon so that maybe you can not have to rent a U-Haul truck in 5 years or something. It's just like everywhere else in the world is like you rent your moving van whenever you actually need to move. You don't haul around an enormous vehicle for 5 years, before that actually happens. It's just funny American things that we do that don't make much sense. And Dom says, Matt, you're the most down to earth YouTuber. This community is amazing. The community is amazing. I appreciate it. I try and be myself, and hopefully hopefully that's enough. And so I'm very thankful for all of you who stuck around. Elijah says, just watched your older Volvo S60R design video this morning. Thanks for watching it. Hopefully it was helpful for you and enjoyable. That was those older S60s, as long as you don't care about the infotainment, they're nice cars, but the new ones are so much nicer for sure. And Brian's joining. Thanks for joining, Brian. He says, good morning, everybody. And I guess you're probably on the West Coast there, Brian. And thanks for joining here. Mike says, isn't the 1500 grouped in with light duty? I believe it is. So yeah, I think, like I mentioned, it's probably the heavy duty stuff that's more exempt. But I thought once you're still in the truck class, you're kind of grouped separately. So I don't think that would be in the light. Like that's not in the same classification as like a mid-sized SUV or, a sedan or something like that. Those are the ones that really are getting stricter with that stuff. And I think that's why you're seeing like the first plug-in hybrid from Dodge is the Hornet, in that smaller segment to try and desperately save themselves from the enormous pit of fines they've dug for themselves with the Charger and the Challenger. So they're hoping they probably move a lot of Hornets, even if they don't sell a lot of the plug-in hybrids, just selling the regular 2-liter turbo one, and that thing's gas, if fuel economy numbers at least will help with their average a lot. The Truck and Car Guy says, if they could hybridize a V8 full-size truck and not compromise its payload or towing, it could sell, but a lot of buyers are very traditional and hard to please. Definitely true there. Yeah, I think there could be potential there. I think, we'll see. I think Tundra seems to be doing pretty well, I think. I haven't looked at sales numbers for that, but I mean, that's kind of the first attempt at doing something a little more hybridized. And, I think some buyers really do, appreciate that. And you also have the e-torque thing with the Ram, but that's not really much more than, an extended stop start. Same thing with the Tundra, I guess, but it's a little more extended than the e-torque is. But yeah, so the questions, T says he feels targeted, not trying to target anyone or single anybody out, just, the way things go here in America as far as interesting buyer preferences as a whole for the masses. Obviously, I'm talking to enthusiasts here, and obviously we all have different interests and opinions and things like that. But I think we generally kind of rally around the whole fun to drive kind of thing a little bit more than the average consumer that just likes their enormous stuff for the those fringe reasons they need those things for. And Caleb says, yeah, it's definitely location-based. Rural Oklahoma is a different story. And Goth Rocker says, Matt, I agree with you about trucks. I have a 98 Chevy CK 1500 4x4 truck used for the Home Depot trips, scrapyard, etc. It is truly a work truck, no power windows, all basic. 25 years old, 91,000 miles. That's awesome. And yeah, good to see that, you put it to work. That's one nice thing, I don't ever have to rent trucks for most of the things that I do because, most of the time I just I'm able to wait for a press truck to show up. And then that's the week I'm like, okay, everyone, I have a truck. Like, who needs to move stuff? And that's usually when I do the scrap runs. And that was funny. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I had to do a scrap run. My father-in-law had a bunch of stuff he wanted to scrap, and I had a few things as well I had to get rid of. And so it was actually the week that I had the Hummer EV truck. So I took that to the scrapyard, which was hilarious also for them to weigh it because the way the scrapyard, at least the ones that I'm at, work, they weigh the vehicle before you dump your stuff, and then after, and then you just get paid for the difference. And seeing that thing, rack up, I don't know what it was, like 9,500 pounds or something like that. But I mean, I first got lost and I went into the wrong entrance to the scrapyards. I had to ask some guys like, oh, like, how do I get over to the other part? And they told me, and I'm like rolling up on this like tiny little guy in this enormous Hummer. And it was just like this thing. They were like, what the heck is going on? It's like super bizarre. And, I'm sure that was probably not something that any of those people expected to see that day. So that was fun to show up in that thing. And I think I did another haul in the F-150 Lightning, and that was also another one. But that one doesn't stand out quite as much as the Hummer did. Truck and Car Guy says, I guess I'm guilty of that since I bought a wagon when I could have just bought a coupe. I mean, I think a wagon is a lot more practical, and I love wagons. I would totally own a wagon as well if I needed, a little bit more space. But yeah, no, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. Everyone has their reasons for buying vehicles, and my reasons are silly as well. Why do I have, a 480 horsepower Mustang that I usually just go to get groceries in? I mean, it's overkill. It's stupid. So it's an overkill in a different way. So I'm not trying to be judgy at all for anyone who buys a truck and never uses it as a truck. But it's just one of those funny, things that you observe. But I think wagons are really a lot more useful as well. And you also don't have any kind of fuel economy penalty really. It's just, I don't know, I feel like wagons are kind of a better solution. And that's why, again, people who do tend to, do a lot of, hauling and stuff in Europe, places like that, they have wagons or hatchbacks, where those things are a lot more popular for that reason. And actually, in this week, I have a Volkswagen GTI for my press vehicle, and that little thing too. I mean, you drop down the seats, and there's so much space since it's so boxy. You can haul so much stuff in that thing if you don't need to use the back seat. It's one of those really fun little cars. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife in a lot of ways. And so David says, would you recommend the latest gen Volvo S60 T6 or T5 with the manufacturer's extended warranty? With an extended warranty, yes, I would. I think they're really great, especially if you are someone who values safety. I mean, Volvo is still untouchable. I mean, it's so funny how they put a Volvo through a crash test, that the Volvo was existing before the crash test ever existed. And yet, it still passes with flying colors because like Volvo, Mercedes, and a few other companies engineer for their own internal standards, and they don't just engineer their safety for whatever the current tests are just to pass that and call it good and check the box. So, I mean, Volvo, and that's why I'm very into safety, especially now that I have a daughter. And so for me, like S60 would be a really close competitor to like a Genesis G70, although that got really excellent crash test ratings as well. But, G70, Acura TLX, which also, again, another very safe vehicle. But the Volvo, I think, still might even have a little bit of an edge there. And so T6, T5, T8, any of those are all great. And, they're not the best in a lot of ways. They don't have the best infotainment system. I say ride quality isn't the best either, especially if you go for the R-Design version. I haven't driven a non-R-Design S60. So there's certainly drawbacks there, but I think they still look great. And they're just really nice cars. Yeah. So I'd say certainly if that's something you're considering, definitely get the warranty like you mentioned. And I think otherwise, it could be a solid car. I wouldn't keep it forever still. Definitely, wouldn't keep it beyond the warranty period. But at least it's a nice thing to have for a few years or something. Definitely, I think I could recommend that. Elijah says, when do you think the U.S. will see another hot hatch like the likes of the Renault Megane RS and the Seat Cooper Leon? I don't know, if we'll ever see stuff like that again, honestly, which is sad to say, but I don't know. I don't think it's ever going to happen. Ford's bailed on all the ST stuff that's actually, car based. There's really not much else. I think the closest you can get to stuff like that is like the Mazda 3 turbo hatch these days, things like that. And of course you have like the European stuff, like the GLA 45 and, things like that. But that's, the A3 or the S3, RS3. I think those are the closest, even though we only get them in sedans here in the States. But I think RS3 is, one of the hottest, like little European things we actually get here in the States. And I love it so much. RS3 is another car I'd love to own someday. There's so many good cars out there these days. It's so hard to just focus on it. I'm kind of glad I'm not an actual car buyer currently. And I just have the Bullet and I'm keeping that forever. And, we're set on Beth's car for a while because, man, it's so hard to make decisions with all these wonderful options out there these days. And so Goth likes the story about going to the scrapyard in the Hummer EV. On a side note, though, these EVs are so heavy, a lot of people that get hit by these will be in trouble, in my opinion. Definitely. And I could go on a whole rant about that. I mean, the only thing I'll say is at least they'll have all the advanced safety stuff. So hopefully they will hit less people as long as people don't turn that stuff off. But yeah, I mean, getting hit in a Hummer is going to be scary because I mean, that is a big, heavy thing. And it's also super high off the ground. So the impact point is way higher. And so that thing, like any lifted truck, is going to just bypass all the built in crumple zones and stuff that, these cars are engineered for. And then if you're just hitting straight into a B pillar or hitting straight into a windshield or something, it's like, in anything, even if it's light and it's up that high, you're in bad shape. But even if it's heavy and then you're way up high, yeah, I really hope the safety tech works really well on those things to protect other people from those Hummers because yeah, they're going to be scary whenever idiots start driving them, and already have. I've already seen last year there were some stories of people trying to do the Watts to Freedom stuff in the middle of a downtown area or something like that, and it's just like terrifying that they're that fast as well as being super heavy. And a lot of people hate the Hummer for that reason, and I can totally understand that viewpoint. I think they're cool and silly and fun, but in the wrong hands, like any car, I mean, any car can kill you, but the Hummer is, yeah, a lot more of a risk to the general public than anything else. Honestly, that's not a massive, full size. Honestly, even though heavy duty trucks are lighter than that, so I mean, outside of an 18-wheeler, that's going to be the one of the riskier things to get hit by for sure. Yeah, and honestly, and not even the Hummer, anything that's larger and higher up, a lot of those things, that's why we're seeing increased pedestrian deaths and bicyclist deaths, sadly, is because everyone's in stuff that's bigger and higher and heavier. And so, you're going to have a higher fatality rate when those things run into anything, so it's, and that's one of the things that a lot of these, regulators and stuff are trying to work on is like, how do we, make this safer? Like, how do we reverse this trend of everyone wanting something enormous and heavy? And the electric stuff in general just makes it worse. And, like that's even one thing, with the Mach-E, whenever we were considering that, it was one of those things where like, I'm seeing more and more people getting into trucks, and it's like, I don't want a truck. I don't want an enormous SUV. But I also want us to be protected from a weight standpoint, because in the end, physics wins, and the heavier thing is going to be the thing that ends up coming out as the winner typically. So that's why with the Mach-E, it was like this happy medium of like, okay, yes, it's smaller, and so it's not enormous, but yet it is heavy thanks to the EV thing. And so as long as we're being responsible and we're not hitting someone else, which thankfully me and my wife are very careful drivers, and all that, knock on wood, we've never had any accidents that were our fault. So it's just one of those things, where we're mindful that I'm mindful in the Mach-E that I'm in a 5,000 pound vehicle, even in that, and that I can't go around corners as fast. I can't count on myself to brake super fast whenever the conditions are a little slick. Those types of things you just got to be mindful of in these big heavy things. And you got to really understand the physics and weight transfer, things that you learn in driving schools and stuff like that, of how these things are going to react. It's all interesting. Anyway, random tangent there, but yeah, it's interesting to see how these things develop. Dom says, I'd like to create a 2-door, 2-seater hatchback, roll down the windows, a la carte features, 10 grand brand new. I think it's a great idea. I would love, again, I wish I knew some like billionaire friends or something. I could just start a car company, just like do super cheap stuff and be like, yeah, like, why do you need power windows? Why do you need, a big stereo? Why do you need, a screen? Like, give someone a single DIN radio, like basically make like a remanufactured like 1995 Honda Civic, and just like put that out there, and maybe give it modern safety with modern airbags, modern crumple zones, but otherwise make a 95 Honda Civic. Just put it out there, see what happens. Like maybe no one would buy it, and I don't know. But if you have something super cheap, I think as the years go on here, that it's going to get more and more appealing. If things don't improve economically. And 2-track jacks. I know 6 people who own HD trucks. Only one of them uses it for daily full capabilities. He's a farmer. 2 of the others see weekend duty as camper haulers. The other 3 are mall queens. Okay, so there, in your experience, about 50% are actually used for their capabilities, which is actually better than I was expecting. So good to hear that it's a 50-50 split there for for the people So yeah, it's funny. And I know a lot of people do use trucks for good reasons for sure. Jay says, do you think Toyota will bring the Chinese EVs from BYD to North America? I don't think so, especially with all these new, everyone wants those tax credits, and getting batteries from China means they're excluded essentially. So I don't think so, and I haven't seen any indications that that's something they're considering at all. I think they will definitely just do their own thing and use the Panasonic batteries they have in the BZ4X and use those. If they're going to, bring any of that Chinese stuff like the BZ3, if they bring that here, it'll definitely get a battery swap and, just get rid of all the BYD stuff, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that's going to be the case. I could be wrong, but that's my take on it. Jason says we also hope that Hummer owners don't commit road rage. Yeah, which, yeah, I don't know. That buyer demographic I feel is a little more prone to road rage, but we'll have to see. Truck and Car Guy says sometimes it's the people with the most ordinary cars that have the worst road rage for some reason. Also very true though, for sure, and it can afflict anyone for sure. Jay says the size increase of the SUVs and trucks will be the demise of small vehicles like the Miata and 086 BRZ. Yeah, and honestly, that's something that even crosses my mind. If I did have, the ability to get a Miata or GR86 or something like that, is these days, yeah, you're just a tiny little thing on the road, and it's something that it's something to be mindful of, the fact that you are on the losing end of the equation if other people screw up. Obviously, again, no one likes being in an accident. It's oftentimes, not great regardless of what you're in, but it's just one of those things. It just depends on your risk profile. But that's one of the perks also of the Bullet, and why I love the Mustang is I am sitting up a little higher. They weigh almost 4,000 pounds. Not heavy these days, honestly, but at least I got a better shot than I would in a Miata or a GR86. But still wouldn't stop me from owning one, because again, it'd be a vehicle I wouldn't be driving all the time, so I wouldn't be quite as worried. But it also depends on where you live. If you live in a place where everyone has trucks, like Texas or something, then it might be a little bit of a harder thing to justify than if you're in like New England or something where there's probably not as much of that. So it just comes down to the people around you and all that too. And Elijah says, I'll buy any hatchback that looks good and goes fast. Yeah, I mean, hatchbacks, it's kind of hard, but I think Golf R, GR Corolla, Civic Type R, soon Integra Type S, those are all going to be really great choices these days that are, all awesome cars. And the Truck and Car Guy says, I trust a truck driver over Hummer driver. Definitely, especially if you're talking about like an 18-wheeler driver. Yeah, 100%, because those guys are trained. They see this all the time. They know how to be safe. Yeah, I definitely would as well. Dom says, I'm down to buy a 95 Civic, upgrade the airbags, headlights, taillights, and market it. Yep, I think that would be, I don't know. Maybe someday one of us hits the lottery, Dom, we can try and go into business together and make that a reality. Mike says, curious about the standard brake size, what the standard brake size is on Hummer EV. They are really big brakes, because I think that limits what they're able to do wheel and tire wise. But I do remember from my review, it's a little foggy. They're not huge though. It is certainly under braked, but it's a truck, so it's not like it has to have brakes that are the same size as a Bugatti or something. But I think they made them as big as they possibly could. But yeah, it's not. I don't think it's certainly the strongest feeling brakes. I mean, when I had it for a week, it was one of those vehicles where you definitely got to give yourself some braking distance. I think Car and Driver did a braking test, and it's basically as bad as like a 2500 truck as far as how quickly it brakes. So it's not great. Also, the tires don't help, since they're on these mud tires basically. And Dom says, I have my CDL, so there's many rules to keep everybody around us safe. Yeah, and that's one of the nice, I think that's one of the big differences too with the whole actual trucking industry is, there is so many regulations and rules. And I think in that case, regulations and rules are important. We can't just have the Wild West. And you're seeing that with, how the normal, passenger truck market is the Wild West. You can do whatever you want essentially. And, we will see what the toll is as a result. But I think, it might make some sense to regulate this stuff that's 9,000 pounds and, get to a point where you have some type of higher licensing standard for vehicles, just so people know how to handle 9,000 pounds. Because you put someone who's been used to driving, something way lighter, and then you put them in something like that, they're not used to how it handles and how it brakes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you get yourself into trouble even if you're not being reckless. So I mean, it's yeah, I personally would be in favor of seeing, some more stricter licensing standards just to make everyone safer. And I think obviously, American licensing is really lax in general. And that's one thing that, you go to Europe or any other place where it's like all these hoops you have to jump through to even get a license. And, then you wonder why they have such lower traffic deaths and why they're able to have nice things like the Autobahn, because you can trust people to actually be sane and smart about it, for the most part. And, we're not there in America, unfortunately. And it's a bummer, but, all right. Other questions here. Let me see. Talking about the trucking with Dom and trucking car guy, and 2-track jacks as far as simple basic car with crank windows available. It goes, Chevy's had that till 2022. Chevy Spark MSRP 14 grand with a manual transmission, 4-door hatchback. I didn't know the Spark still had it up until last year. I'm impressed that they offered it that long. That's great. But yeah, Sparks went away, and I know Nissan Versa and even Mirage, I think, yeah, it's power windows now for sure. And yeah, Dom says the Hummer can be a weapon, should be regulated. Yeah, I mean, any car can be a weapon, though. That's the tricky thing about it is, how do you regulate that in a fair way? Because again, you can just point the finger and say, well, you could launch a Miata, someone, and you still inflict damage as well. So it's just obviously the Hummer is more of a risk. So I guess it's kind of like the not to get into the gun debate, but that kind of thing of, a knife versus a AK-47 or something, but it's, I guess kind of like that. It's tough, it's tough to figure out, what's fair, what's reasonable, what's the right thing to do, and so I think right now we're just in a holding pattern with, all these larger vehicles and just trucks in general. And just, we're seeing, even though cars have more safety features than ever, we're seeing still deaths go up. And so I think that's something, these people smarter than myself are working on, how do we go about trying to make stuff safer for everyone? And Goth Rocker says, I've been saying it for years. In America, we need better driving tests. Yeah, I'm glad you agree. Yeah, too many people have licenses that really should not. Very true. It's insane. All the stories I've heard about people who basically, like, they drove around the block and they're like, okay, here you go. And it's like, it's no wonder that everyone's crashing and dying and stuff, because it's just like, if that's the requirement, then, good luck. This is why, again, safety is really important in cars, because at least, and people have also told me, they'd love to see me do motorcycle reviews and stuff. And it's like, I'm never getting on a motorcycle because I just don't trust everyone else around me. Like, even if you're the best rider, if someone's going to hit into me with a Hummer, I want to at least have metal and airbags around me. So that's just, to me, my risk profile just cannot handle the higher risk of motorcycles and stuff like that. And Ted, thanks for joining. Says happy Saturday. Thanks for podcasting this weekend live. Happy to do it. It's always a good time here hanging out with everyone. And Chris says you need to safety foam and demolition. Yeah, I'm just trying to stay safe with the family, trying to, I think especially once you have kids, it really kind of puts a different perspective on things, but, wanting to make sure that, you protect them and also, protect yourself for their sake, if nothing else, and, being around for them. Smile Per Mile says, hey, Matt, the roads you used for the reviewing the CX90 looked really fun and picturesque. Thanks for joining, Smile Per Mile. Sorry, I didn't get to your question till now, but yeah, the roads for the CX90 were awesome. So we were on Pacific Coast Highway there for a lot of it. So I'm literally winding down, Pacific Coast Highway, and that thing, so much fun, so many awesome roads. And that was one that was, unfortunately, I was in a little bit of a rush with the CX90. So I wasn't able to kind of take in the surroundings as much as I would have liked to. But I made it happen. But that one, I don't think I talked about that last week, but this could be a fun little side story for those of you who are joining. So CX90 was a little bit of a dramatic thing because they did a really good job of setting up the program. So Mazda was really smart about the way that they offer us content creation spots. So we had actually zoned off places where we could stand and not have people bothering us or anything, and actually be able to do the videos in peace. And so that was really good. So you saw me at the pier there in San Francisco for the stand-up. But the funny thing is, so I mismanaged my time, unfortunately, for that event. So what happened was the morning I was in the plug-in hybrid, totally fine, was great. Everything was, fun, had a good time, driving it and stuff. Was right on schedule. I was actually ahead of schedule. I got to the lunch spot like a half an hour early, got to the lunch spot. It's this, swanky house, and, they'd rented out at Mazda, and I just had a quick lunch, and I always usually either skip lunch on these events or I eat super fast because I always have so much filming to do. But this one I was like, okay, I'm like ahead of schedule. I feel comfortable. I have plenty of time. I got, everything set up really well here for this event. I don't need to rush. I'm going to have some lunch and actually just enjoy myself a little bit before I get back out and hop in the Inline-six version for the drive back, because we were way out. I mean, we were like 2 hours away from San Francisco, basically, whenever, for the drive loop. So I was eating my lunch, and then the one engineer comes over, Dave Coleman, who's the dynamics engineer for the CX90. So talking to him, and it's, and then the powertrain engineer, Jay Chen, came up, and, we're all chatting. And whenever you're talking with these people who literally like engineered this entire vehicle, like you can learn so much from them, and just getting to pick their brain. And they're also just cool guys. Just talking to them in general, just about anything, is always good. But you just, I'm just like soaking all this stuff up like a sponge, and I'm asking questions about, the engine. I'm asking questions about this, that, and the other. And so many of the things I had to cut out of the video because the video would have been an hour long if I actually was able to cover everything I wanted to cover on that car, because there's so much new stuff. But it was just one of the things that I got carried away. I was talking with them, and I ended up talking with them longer than I should have. And then by the time I left, basically they were like, oh, it should take about 2 hours to get back to San Francisco, because I had to get back to the pier to do my stand-up, because I was like, oh, that would be really cool to do the stand-up there at the pier. But that was scheduled for later in the day to do that stuff. Joe Rady was smart. He went to the pier first in the morning and got his stand-up done, and so he avoided the headache that I'm about to tell you. But so I went in the Inline-six version and left at like 2:00, and there was like a 2-hour drive. I was like, oh, I'll get there like, maybe 4:30 if I hit a little bit of traffic. And they were supposed to be there till 6:00 at the pier. I was like, oh, I got plenty of time. Dinner's at 6:30. I'll be set. So I start driving, and the nav, the Mazda nav did not account for the traffic. I don't know why. I thought it was intelligent enough to like predict that I'd hit traffic at 4:00 in San Francisco. And I should have known that it would have been worse than I expected. But they were like, even the Mazda, like, drive people were like, oh yeah, like, it's about 2 hours back, it'll be fine. So I was like, okay, cool. So I assumed that everyone had already accounted for the traffic. But as I'm approaching the city, the time keeps going further and further back, and it's like, you'll get there at 5, you'll get there at 5:15, 5:30. Now I'm sweating bullets because I'm like, crap, they're only going to be there till 6. And it takes me usually at least 45 minutes to an hour to film my stand-up, film all the exterior B-roll, all the interior B-roll, do my interior spiel on, what I think about the interior. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, well, I may actually not have enough time to do this. Like, this is getting like nerve-wracking. And then it got worse and worse. I kept sitting in traffic, and I got to the point where I had to do some creative editing, and I don't know how many of you picked up on this in the video. Probably, I hope no one did, because I hope I did a good job on covering my tracks here. But I actually had to film my interior comments on the CX90 in traffic in San Francisco. So I'm actually like inching up, but I was able to isolate the audio thanks to AI. Actually, there's a new Adobe thing where you can isolate your audio so it sounds like it was recorded like in a studio. And so I used that to make it sound like I was standing still, but I was actually slowly rolling in traffic in San Francisco while I'm talking about the interior for some of the parts. If you saw the actual second and third row parts of that vehicle for that review, I actually took that from my reveal video and had to cheat there a little bit and use the reveal video footage, because it was the same kind of same car and everything, so it was the same impression. It was just I was going to re-record it for the new interior that I had, because it was a different color than the one that I had on the reveal event a few months back. But by the time I got to the pier, it was like 6:00, or it was like 5:50 I got there, and I was like freaking out, like, man, I'm not even going to film any stand-up. What am I going to do? I was like, I guess I'll just do something different for an intro than what I usually do. And so I was like sweating bullets. I got to the pier, and then no one seemed to be at the pier. So I was like, okay, I guess everyone left early. So I just went straight back to the hotel. I'm like, by any chance, can I go back to the pier and film? Because I still need a little bit more time with this vehicle. I got caught in traffic, and they were really cool about it, and they let me keep the car longer. And so I went back. And I was just a little late for dinner, but I was able to do my stand-up, and I did the quick B-roll there that you saw at the pier, but it was not very polished. It was not what I wanted to do. But it was one of those times where sometimes you got to roll with the punches and do things a little differently. And so, like I said, I had to thankfully I had the footage from the, reveal event. So I was able to lean on that and, use some of the Mazda B-roll and stuff to kind of cover the stuff that I didn't have time to film. But that was a stressful one, but that was just entirely my fault, because I just got caught up with the engineers, and that was just my mistake. I just wish I would have known the traffic would have been as bad as it was, but it was, it was great talking with the engineers. I don't regret it because I learned so much about that car, and it's one of those things that like no other time are you gonna have a chance to sit down with Mazda's two lead engineers and just like talk cars with them and talk about their brand new CX-90. Like that's never going to be something else. So I never regret doing those types of things. But it's just, it just made it tough on me trying to actually get the stuff done I needed to do for the video. So fun little behind the scenes there. But anyway, I know I'm missing a ton of questions. We're coming up close to 2 hours here. So I'm going to see if I can get caught up on the member questions and then we'll head out here. But, all right. You see, Angel says, I recently learned that in Europe, they have a separate driving test if you have a manual car. Yeah, and it's awesome. And I think it's actually a higher level of license because you're, a little more knowledgeable, I guess, about driving versus someone who just has an automatic. And Dom says, I think just have a person drive the car they're buying, have them take a test in the car they're driving. I'd love to see you ride a bike. I respect your safety consideration. Thanks, Dom. Yeah, as far as that's actually a good idea. I had never thought of that, to just have them. Yeah, like maybe, but that'd be so hard. But I guess if it's a government thing, you like say, hey, like before you sign on the dotted line for this Hummer, like, make you take a course, I guess, of like, here's what you're dealing with here, and just like make them sign off on the fact that this is a 9,000-pound vehicle. You need to be aware of that, something like that. I don't know. It's an interesting idea. I'm sure it's something that would never fly, though, especially with dealers. They would definitely fight that. There's no way that would happen. But it's an intriguing idea. I've never thought about doing it at the purchase level. That's a very interesting idea. You got some great ideas, Dom. Thanks for chiming in there. Linda says, bye, Matt, all the best to you and your family. Having a child certainly makes one thing differently and makes more conservative decisions as far as car choices. Definitely. Yeah. It's just, your priorities change for sure. Truck and Car Guy says, I think part of it is the distractions nowadays and lack of self-control. Yeah. And I did see some reports about how distractions are even worse than the weight problem as far as, vehicles these days, and just everyone being so much more distracted for sure. Dylan, thanks for joining. Says, hey, Matt. Two-Track Jack is talking about, the lack of self-control there with people these days. Dylan says, by the way, Street Speed 717 is replacing his C701 with a Mustang. Wow, that's crazy. I never thought he'd go for a Mustang. He's a Chevy guy through and through there, but I know he's opened up with the Ram and stuff in the past. But it's the thing with, if you're someone who does the rotating cars on YouTube, you got to just buy whatever's the hot new thing and, keep it for a few months, make your content and move on. I get too attached to cars and I just don't have the time also to tinker with cars like that. Like, a lot of these guys do. So I just got to move on quick, but that's cool that he's going to have a Mustang. That'll be cool. Truck and Car Guy says, I also agree that the licensing standard should be stricter, especially when driving around large commercial vehicles. Yeah, definitely. Goth says, I think your Mazda CX-90 video came out great. Thank you, Goth. I'm glad, no one noticed that. I also, funny other little side thing, I know we're at 2 hours here. So, last couple of things here. On the Ioniq 6, another little behind the scenes thing. So that one, for some reason, I don't know if you guys ever have your phone get like lint in the charging port and then it like doesn't make contact. You got to clean it out. I usually just use a wireless charger whenever I put my phone on the nightstand at night. And so I don't ever really use the plug very much. But I went to go plug in my mic, because I actually plug in my mic to my phone whenever I did the stand-up part there for the exterior talk on the Ioniq 6. And that one, my phone actually didn't connect to the microphone because of that port being gunked up. And so it was this really just bad audio for that. And it was just basically recording from my phone's mic instead of from the actual lapel mic that I was wearing. And so for that one, I had to re-record that audio. And that's why there's hardly any footage of me standing next to the car aside from the "What's up, everybody?" because like everything else was just re-recorded as a voiceover. Because it was just like unsalvageable for the audio. I'm like, well, I'm noticing this after I've already left the spot. I'm already like done with the car for the day. It's out of my control. So I just had to cover that up with B-roll. And thankfully it worked out for that one too. But I had a few little snafus of filming here in the past few weeks with all the hectic stuff going on. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind. So made a few mistakes there. All right, so we'll wrap it up here. See, Dylan says, have you gotten to drive his ZR1 after he added more power to it? No, I drove Street Speed 717's first ZR1 when he first got that, but I haven't since. We haven't met up or talked in a few years now, so haven't had any experience with any of his other cars or anything. I'm pretty out of the loop on his stuff these days, unfortunately. And yeah, and Caleb says, do you film with your phone or just audio? I just record the audio on my phone. Every once in a while, I will film a few little clips on my phone if my other camera's either mounted already or something like that. But typically, I just use my other cameras to film everything else. And Goth Rocker says, go another hour. This is fun today. Great talk. I wish I could, but our daughter's gonna be waking up from her nap, and I gotta be there for her and have some fun here with her this Easter weekend. But it was so much fun hanging out with you guys here again for the live stream. Thanks so much for joining here. I hope you all have a great Easter and a great weekend, regardless of whether or not you celebrate. But thank you all very much for joining here in the live stream. It's always a blast. And stay tuned. We'll be doing another one here next week as well. This will be another Sunday one. We'll get back to the Sunday routine. But anyway, thank you all very much for joining and for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.